Going on walks at night was always a relaxing, cathartic, and peaceful experience for me. Everything from the sounds of the crickets to the chills of the cool night wind helped cure the stressful days that I often went through. I'm a warehouse employee for a steel mill. Working around metal and hot furnaces wasn't exactly the most relaxing job out there. I would come home all 5 days a week, dripping in perspiration with the smell of smoke and metallic substances engulfing me, as if they were flames around a burning log. Therefore, these nightly walks were sort of a cure to all that. It was a way to improve my quality of life. I don't know what I would do without them. But on this night though, something had felt off. Things were quieter than usual. I live in a pretty decent neighborhood. It was no gated community or anything, but I felt safe in the area. There wasn't much crime, and in the rare times that there was, it was usually simple break-ins or theft. No murder, drug cartels, or anything like that. But despite all of that, I had my guard up tonight. I even picked up a girthy stick that I had found laying next to the sidewalk just in case. Step by step, I marched down the streets, the wind howling as I guided myself through the dimly lit area. One car ended up driving by me. It was a smaller red sedan with a few scratches on the side. I didn't quite get a good look at the driver because of the light reflection, but something about the car felt eerie as it passed by, like it just came out of nowhere. I huffed to myself as I gripped my arbitrary melee weapon. When I set my sights upon the area behind me, only the thick darkness of the night stared back. I could make out the figure of an owl perched on a tall-looking pine tree, but it wasn't moving or hooting. It stood as still as a block of cement, almost as if it was watching me. I couldn't make out any specific features of the owl, just the general silhouette of the creature, as it stared me down like I was a prey item. Now, this wasn't the scariest thing in the world, but it was slightly unsettling. I involuntarily gripped my stick a little bit more forcefully as I returned the owl's stomach-churning gaze. The critter didn't move in the slightest, even as I stared back. It was still appearing as if it were taxidermied. The fact that it didn't even flinch made it seem much more strange, sinister if you will. But eventually, I came to the conclusion that I couldn't stare at the thing forever, and I simply turned around to keep walking. I wasn't going to let my night be ruined by just one little out-of-place event. Even though I had moved on, the encounter still sat in the back of my mind as I pressed on. I just thought that it would make some good material for a joke at work tomorrow. My coworkers were pretty big fans of comedic relief during the busy hours, especially when they're constantly on high alert to prevent getting chopped up by huge mechanical blades or getting melted by liquid scrap metal. After pressing on through the roads for a few more minutes, I had arrived at the neighborhood park. The age of the structures were becoming pretty obvious as the years came and went. The supports of the swing sets were rusting. The wood chips were more scattered than twigs in a forest. And these slides appeared as if they were going to turn you into a Human Connect floorboard, with all the pieces of sharp plastic sticking out prominently like small mountains. I had come to this park often as a child. I even felt a small wave of nostalgia rush over me the closer to the park that I got. It was like taking a trip down memory lane. As I made my way past the basketball court and towards the opposite end of the park, I could hear an unfamiliar voice call out my name. Carl. I stopped dead in my tracks as my eyes went wide like whirlpools. The voice in question was that of a young boy. Just from the sound alone, I could predict that he was no more than 10 years old. I didn't have a family or any young children in my life that I knew of. Not ones that knew my name anyway. Hello? I called back into the night, still spotting absolutely nothing or no one around me. I see you, Carl. The young and unseen boy called out again. His tone became much more forceful. It was at this point that I had felt my adrenaline begin to kick in. Everything around me began to slow down, while the opposite happened to my mind and instincts. My alertness shot up like an express elevator as I felt my hands slowly shift into fists. It seemed like a bit much for what I thought was a little boy, but when you feel threatened, your instincts don't discriminate. "Shouldn't you be at home, kid?" I called out once again, with no response or change in scenery. I kept still and I stood my ground, looking past bushes, trees, and the cars parked in driveways from where this boy could be. "Joke's over. It's past your bedtime," I pronounced, beginning to become frustrated. But I knew in the back of my mind it was probably useless. "Don't be a meanie, Carl," the mystery boy replied. Except this time, he came off much more angry than before. It was like I could feel the hatred radiating from him, like he was a cooling tower in a power plant. Yet I still didn't have a clue what he looked like. "Hey, I'm serious, knock it off," I shouted, making sure to put some rasp into my voice. The sudden sound of footsteps clashing against the sidewalk behind me made me jump like a frightened deer. I frantically looked around with my fists up in a boxer stance as the sound came closer and closer. It activated the deepest of primal fear and anxiety within me. The footsteps were small. They sounded like something that could come from a small boy. But yet, I felt like I was being hunted by a predator. If the kid was trying to scare me, then he was doing his job too well. The footsteps weren't followed by any sort of contact, and the boy still had yet to reveal himself, but that didn't comfort me in the least. Laugh at me all you want, but I was honestly glad that the kid didn't show himself. "We see you, Carl," came multiple voices this time, and simultaneously, they all had an echoing reverberation to them. It sounded as if they were underwater, with some sort of sonar devices hooked up to their windpipes. The voices all surrounded me, a mix of men, women, and children. It almost sounded as if they were all happy, but not in a wholesome manner. It was a sinister and evil kind of happy, something that a not-so-nice kind of creature would use to lure children into a trap. But what I saw when I looked around, nothing will ever make me forget that. I peered my eyes to all of the houses in the area. I could see silhouettes in the windows. It was all men, women, and children. I couldn't make out any details of their features or bodies. They were all pitch black, with the exception of two red glowing dots coming from the area that was supposed to be their eyes. They all didn't move, not even a muscle. Their gazes all focused on me, while I stood there helplessly like a wounded gazelle surrounded by hungry lions. I could feel my hands shaking uncontrollably as sweat soaked my pores. My teeth grinded together as I involuntarily clenched my jaw. "This is not your hour, Carl," said a much deeper male voice, with enough bass to shake the foundation of a mansion. It was raspy and did not sound humanly possible for even the most masculine of men to have. But right after that voice had spoken, I had suddenly awoken laying on the playground stairs in the park. The passing of time had seemed instantaneous, like I had only blinked instead of slept. "What the heck?" I huffed groggily, lifting myself up before pulling out my phone to check the time. 9:34 a.m. Had I gotten drunk the previous night or taken something? I did everything in my power to rationalize what had happened, but no answer seemed correct. I felt as if I had been transported to an entirely different dimension. The usual sounds of people going through their normal daily routine was beyond comforting and cathartic after the horror of whatever had happened last night. I really wanted to play it off as just some bad and alcohol-influenced dream, but the logical side of me had no mercy on my psyche. I knew deep down what I had experienced was real. And not only was it real, but I had a feeling that it wasn't going to be a one-time thing. The worst part was my mind racing on the way back home. The fact that I had to deal with this alone hit me like a speeding semi-truck on the highway. It wasn't like I could tell anybody. It would be nothing but laughter and mocking before I was thrown into a mental hospital and labeled as just another unreliable crazy person who was in desperate need for recognition. Everything seemed fine in the morning. People walking their dogs, going to work and bringing home breakfast items from whatever fast food place they had chosen to go to. When I had arrived back home though, that was when I began to feel slightly on edge again. It should have been the opposite, but I felt myself unnecessarily tense up as I unlocked and opened my front door. The creak of the door followed by the eerie silence of the living room was nothing short of unsettling. I stepped inside and nonetheless, little by little trying to settle back into my humble abode as I kicked my shoes off, sat down on the couch and switched the TV on in order to try and enjoy my Saturday. But it unfortunately turned out to be the biggest mistake of my life. When the TV came on, there was nothing but a static feed, despite the fact that all the settings and cables were as normal as possible. Nothing was out of the ordinary from what I could see. I even went out of my way to check everything twice, yet I failed to find anything that could cause this. You gotta be kidding me, I growled frustratedly, as I was endlessly searching the back of the TV for the potential cause of the problem. A different noise had begun to erupt from the speakers. It was ambient, low and soft music, but something about the tunes felt off. They were almost too deliberate and calm. Soothing wasn't exactly the feeling I would describe when the music played. I took a few small then slow steps back to observe what was happening on screen, which was an even more unfortunate mistake. What I saw horrified me beyond description. I knew in that very moment that I would never be the same afterwards. The footage on the screen depicted the room of an old-looking house. I could tell that no one had bothered to clean or take care of it in any way in years. The floorboards were beat up. The ceiling was cracked and covered with mold. On the walls it appeared as if the paint was trying to forcefully rip itself away. I could see one of the rusted-looking windows in the background, confirming that the video was being filmed at night. What or whoever was holding the camera seemed to be standing at the bottom of the staircase. I could hear their heavy breathing as they held the camera shakily. The terror that I was feeling was laughably minuscule compared to their dread, but there was nothing funny about this. The camera quickly darted down to the floor and then back up to the top of the staircase, which put a near pitch-black silhouette of a woman with glowing red eyes on full display, standing at the top step. The mysterious and ghostly woman was simply staring down at the unlucky soul filming the video. She looked exactly like the figures that I had seen last night, which sent ice-cold chills down my spine and made my hands shake with primal fear. "The night is ours," came the voice of the female silhouette. The voice itself was scratchy and almost broken sounding, like that of a long-term smoker, yet it was much more intimidating than any male voice I had ever heard. Her lips didn't even move as she spoke. "Please," cried a voice coming from behind the camera. It was much softer and pleasant, a more smooth and feminine pitch, which also gave away the fact that the person filming was a woman, although I was suspecting the filming was not voluntarily. I quickly pulled my phone out and opened up the camera app to begin recording what was happening on my TV screen, but as soon as the app opened, there was nothing but a black screen with a white text that read, "Don't be a meanie, Carl." I had no choice. I had to keep watching. My morbid curiosity was peaking and I wanted answers. It wasn't like I could pause or use the remote to tamper with the footage in any way. I even attempted to record it with my DVR, but to no avail. The unseen woman in the video began to plead desperately. I could hear her voice cracking as she sobbed violently in the background, like a small child receiving corporeal punishment. I moved my eyes toward the hallway leading underneath the staircase. Another one of those black figures appeared, except this time, it was the size of a small boy. He looked like what I had imagined the one from last night looking like. I was sure that it might have even been the same kid, or whatever that thing is. In each of his shadowy hands, he held 2 utensils, one being a steak knife, while the opposite hand gripped a fork. They were both rusted. Multiple blades in the fork were bent incorrectly. The woman behind the camera began to cry even more desperately, crying bloody murder, as the figure of the boy began to slowly levitate down the dark hallway towards her. The only indication of his movement being those 2 red, glowing eyes, slowly approaching the camera little by little through the darkness. It was like watching a bullet move toward you in slow motion. Every second of it was a breed of dread I couldn't describe, despite the fact that I wasn't even the victim. Suddenly, the pair of eyes sped up supernaturally fast and were just inches from the camera. The boy's voice turned into an angry and bitter whisper before saying, "I hate you." He said it with such a cold-blooded tone that I refused to believe he was ever once a normal little boy. His phrase was quickly followed by a scream of bloody murder from the woman behind the camera, as blood messily splattered against the screen. Her cries of agonizing pain and indescribable terror could be heard for miles, as the sound of her skin tearing filled the room like a high-powered stereo. It was almost as if the universe was attempting to show me mercy when the video finally cut off, and the morning news had replaced it. Although it was too late at that point, I simply drowned out the sound of the news as I slumped down onto the floor with my face in my hands. I quickly began to break down like a small child. I felt as if my world was collapsing in on me like a ton of bricks. I wanted to know why. Why me? What did I do to anger these beings that would make them want to hurt me? I wasn't a perfect person by any means. I've done some things in my life that I'm not proud of, but most people wouldn't consider me evil. I grabbed my laptop from the living room and bolted upstairs, slamming and locking the door behind me before turning on as many lights as possible. If the darkness was what they needed, all I had to do was subtract that from the equation. I would soon come to learn that this was a futile effort. I began typing up my experience of what had happened so far, and that's where we are now. It's been 2 days of me being locked inside my room with no food or water, but those Nocturnals, as I call them, will come for me before starvation does. It's nighttime outside. I took a quick glance outside my curtains and saw them surrounding the perimeter of the property. They're closing in and I don't have much longer. To whoever finds this document, please share this, I beg of you. I need someone to get my story out there. Even if you don't believe it's true, I just need this to get out there. Now that it's been another day, the little boy's voice is coming from outside of my door. This is it. Whatever you do, do not look out your windows at night. Do not go outside. We do not belong in the dark. Our ancestors were right to be scared of the dark. Lock your doors. Turn on your lights. Because Our ancestors were right to be scared of the dark. Lock your doors. Turn on the lights. Because That was it. Those were my cousin Carl's last words. As much as everything in my mind and body told me not to, I uploaded the document. He wanted his story to get out there, and I wanted to respect his final wishes. That was the least I could do. Most people may call me a moron, but I believe this story. Every single word. Carl had always been a mentally stable person throughout his life. He drank here and there, but only in moderation. There was no reason to doubt he was telling the truth, even though it made my stomach churn. When I had gotten to Carl's house, His chair still had a dent in it from sitting down for an extended period of time. His laptop was open but went into sleep mode. I tried to go through his TV's history and records to find the video that he was talking about, but the thing had been completely fried. I'm not even sure how. He never mentioned that happening in the document. My mind was racing, trying to think of solutions. I wanted to find Carl. I held out a false hope that he might still be alive, but what could I possibly do? I wasn't equipped to deal with this supernatural stuff. For God's sake, I'm a grocery store stalker. The most insane thing I ever see is people not being able to do simple math to calculate their change. But all that meant I needed to find someone who knows what they're doing. Someone with the skills, tools, and knowledge to help find where my cousin is. If he's still alive anyway. One Friday after I finished work, I came home and immediately ransacked every little crevice and corner of the internet to find a paranormal investigator. It should have seemed easy, I know, but half the time it was just frauds or scammers looking to make a quick buck. My entire first night consisted of downing energy drinks and caffeine to keep myself awake while I surfed the web. That is until I came across Ethan Veldor. I read through as much as I could about the guy, his arsenal, particular areas of expertise and past experience. From what I gathered, he seemed to be very well educated and proficient with handling demonic and otherworldly forces. Things such as evil spirits, demons, and vengeful ghosts who had decided to overstay their welcome on Earth. I wanted to be as thorough as possible to make sure I was getting my money's worth. But I put my money where my mouth was and decided to give the guy a call. "Hello, is this Mr. Veldor?" I asked. "Hey," he replied, his voice raspy as if he had just woken up. "I'm guessing you're calling for business purposes." "Yeah, I need help with a problem. One that I know you can handle." "All right." He paused for a moment. "What little issue have you got on your hands?" The emotion in his voice was non-existent. "It's a little hard to explain. Is there a way that I could send you something? It's a document. It should give you the information that you need." "Okie dokie, but before we get started, I need half of the payment now, and the other half after the problem is taken care of. That's just my policy." I became slightly frustrated with his dull responses. To me, it felt like he really didn't care too much about the actual problem at all. I couldn't blame him though. His job had to be undeniably exhausting and mentally damaging. "Yeah, I guess I can do that. Do you have an email or something that I can send this document to?" I continued. The rest of the call went as expected. He read off his email address and I proceeded to send over Carl's document. He told me that he would get back to me in 2 days or less, and to sit tight until then. Like that was gonna be easy. Going to work the following day was aggravating to say the least. Not only was I dealing with my uptight supervisor and arrogant customers per usual, but I was on edge about Ethan getting back to me, which only amplified the irritation I usually experienced. I tried to keep my head up to the best of my ability. "Hey Ryan, do you mind going into the back? We just got a shipment from the warehouse and the candy aisle needs to be restocked," my supervisor asked, staring down at his clipboard, which was clearly only meant for show. Yeah, sure, just 1 second," I replied as I finished stocking the current shelf I was working on. "Also," he turned and stopped just before walking away, "I need you to stay late tonight. It's getting close to Halloween and we've been really busy the past week." If there was a way to describe how much I was internally sighing and complaining, I would have gone on and on. But I just kept my mouth shut for obvious reasons and made my way to the back of the store. My supervisor wasn't lying. I could see tons of people doing last-minute shopping for Halloween candy. some of them being small children who didn't want to wait to trick-or-treat. I opened the doors to the back and was immediately hit with a blast of cold air. It was always kept at a lower temperature to preserve the quality of things like ice cream and milk. A moderate amount of flickering accompanied me as I looked around. We had needed to get some of the ceiling tiles in the back replaced for some time now. They were constantly flickering on and off for the past few weeks at this point. I slowly walked towards the south end of the back between the tall shelves. I could see an alarming amount of rust beginning to form on the metal supports. On my way to the end, I saw a sight that froze me right in my place. I tensed up, having absolutely no idea what to do at the unsettling image in front of me. Less than 10 feet away from me stood a man. That's what it looked like anyway. He was a disturbing pitch black and shadowy in his appearance. I couldn't make out any facial features save for a pair of glowing crimson dots, where his eyes should have been. But his shape and general build was similar to someone I had seen before. I just couldn't put my finger on it. The figure stood in the dark corners of the back where the ceiling lights flickered the most, blending into the poorly lit area. "You dare hunt us?" It spoke with such force I thought the room might have shook. The thing even sounded far more demonic than it looked. Its voice reverberated and echoed as if he had a microphone resting in his esophagus. Adrenaline flowed through my veins, but yet I stayed still. I was too stiff to move a muscle or make a sound. My mind was completely blank. "Your efforts are in vain." The shadowy figure began to cackle in an unsettling taunt towards me. Despite there being no movement of its mouth, or any of its body for that matter. What are you? What do you want?" I managed to get out, failing miserably to mask the tension in my voice. The lights began to flicker even more intensely. The room was slowly fading into darkness as I stood there in unexplainable panic. I tried to pull my phone out to record the insane events as soon as the screen lit up. The numbers on the digital clock on my phone were constantly scrambling and changing. It looked like a slot machine of a casino. I wasn't even able to put in the passcode. "You can run and hide. We will always find you. Always." The figure continued on. "This is not your hour, Ryan." I turned to run out of the back. I shoved my phone back into my pocket and practically launched myself through the doors to return to the main space of the store, desperate to get away from that thing. I looked back through the circular window of the doors once I was on the other side. The red-eyed shadow man had disappeared and the lights were no longer flickering. They were working just fine. "Figures," I huffed. "Are you okay?" Came a female voice to my left. I turned to see my coworker Sherry looking at me with great concern. I was in a hunched-over position with my eyes as wide as possible. Her reaction to my seemingly odd behavior was justified. There was multiple seconds of awkward silence between the two of us as I decided how to respond. "Yeah, just almost tripped over," I lied, not wanting to drag Sherry down into my web of confusing nonsense. Okay, right," she responded with a dry expression. "Well, I was coming back here to grab some more stuff to restock the home care aisle. I didn't mean to spook you or anything." "You didn't, it's okay," I replied, straightening my posture. I won't lie to you all. I had always found Sherry rather attractive. She dyed her hair a beautiful light red. Her skin was as flawless as polished marble. Her eyes sparkled like emeralds and she always had been fun to work with. By far my favorite coworker out of anyone. Sherry had always been much more down-to-earth than her appearance would lead you to believe. I had been putting off pursuing any sort of romantic relationship with her. I wasn't usually a fan of getting together with people that I worked with, but lately she had begun to change my mind. Fear of rejection had gotten in my way of ever officially doing anything other than casual flirtation. "Well, I'm glad," Sherry chuckled. We've got our lunch soon, so if you want to meet me in the break room, that would be great. She punctuated her sentence by flashing me a friendly smile. Before I could respond to her proposal, I felt my phone begin to vibrate aggressively in my front pocket. I took it out with a huff of hesitation. It seemed to be strangely working once again. Full display on the screen was the phone number of Ethan Veldor, the paranormal investigator. Yeah, definitely. I gotta take this real quick, I'm sorry. I said as I held up a finger and slowly turned the corner, taking multiple glances around to make sure I was alone with no one around. Hello? I picked up. Greetings, Ryan. Ethan responded, his usual monotony being present again. Greetings? Who says greetings over the phone? You know what, never mind. Did you find anything? I need you to meet with me tomorrow. He responded without answering the question. I'll send the address. Whoa, hold on. Did you find anything? I persisted. Ethan hung up, refusing to answer my question. I hit my fist against the wall in anger before realizing he probably had info if he wanted to meet up in the first place. A customer had walked by at that moment and shot me a look of disappointment, as if they were my boss. The rest of work that day went by as slow as possible after that call, but the highlight was having lunch with Sherry in the break room. It helped to lighten my spirits. But that didn't mean I couldn't get the incident of what happened in the back room off my mind. You been okay? She asked before taking a bite of her vegan burger. First, you were scared like crazy, and now you're all spaced out. It's just been a really stressful week. Carl is still missing. I moaned, slouching back in my chair. I saw that in the news. Sherry glanced at me sympathetically. I'm really sorry. If you need a friend to talk to, I'm here. There was a pause before I spoke. I fixed my posture and sat up straight in my chair, making sure to look Sherry directly in the eyes. I appreciate it. Listen, there's something I've been meaning to. I was quickly cut off by our supervisor storming in, a neglectful expression on his face. He was in his usual authoritarian delusion, always walking around like a tough guy despite being the shortest person in the entire staff. Hey, sorry to interrupt, but break's over, guys. Time to get back to work. Yeah, sorry, I thought, because everyone believes that when you use it as an excuse for the millionth time. When work had finally finished up and I went home, I stayed up all night, mindlessly scrolling through Netflix as I desperately tried to get some sleep. I felt the fatigue behind my eyeballs, yet they refused to close and let me drift off into unconsciousness. I did end up falling asleep that night, but for less than 2 hours. It was a struggle to just climb out of bed that morning and get ready to go meet up with Ethan. But the morning light shining through my windows helped give me the last bit of motivation that I needed. One thing that always puzzled me about Carl was why he enjoyed the night so much. His late night walks were a far cry from what I would have done. He always seemed so excited to do it. I never understood why. The location Ethan had given me to meet him at was surprisingly a library of all places. Call me naive, but it seemed a little too normal for someone like him and his so far cryptic tendencies. Speaking of which, it was a pain to find him in there. I scanned up and down the interior several times with no luck. In my mind, he should have stood out. I guess not. Where the hell are you? I whispered out loud to myself, darting my head around like a crazed pigeon. I was caught off guard when my phone began vibrating from me receiving 2 text messages. I retrieved it out of my pocket and took a glance to find both of them were from Ethan. Behind you, the first one read, "You need glasses or something." I did a 180. There Ethan sat between 2 of the non-fiction bookshelves with his face buried in a novel about the history of supernatural sightings and folklore. I casually went up to him, putting up a front of false courtesy. "You're Ethan Veldor?" I asked. "It's good to finally see you up close." "Sure." came his dry response. "Sit down. I've got something to tell you." I hesitantly sat in the beanbag directly parallel, a look of eager anticipation all over me. "What is it? I've been waiting all night for this," I interrogated. "These Nocturnals, they're nothing like I've ever encountered. It's been a pain in my behind to learn anything about them. I've only been able to gather less than half a page worth of information." The rasp of his voice boomed across the library for a man speaking so quietly. "Aren't they just like ghosts?" Ethan snickered, the closest sound to a full-on laugh that I had ever heard him produce. "No, not even close. I even tried getting ectoplasm from them. Nothing. The typical baits, traps, and everything are useless. They don't bite. In Carl's document, he said something about them needing to be in some sort of darkness. Well, that's true. But one of the few things I did find out is that when they have their sights set on someone, the darkness becomes less and less of a prerequisite for them. And right now, they've got their eye on you." I gripped the arms of my chair as he said it. I couldn't help but feel as if all the fluids in my body ceased flowing. I saw one of them at work yesterday. I could tell by how shook up on the phone you sounded. How do we kill them? Kill them? Ethan scoffed. You don't. You can't. We just need to find a way to... Wait a minute. He paused, standing up from his chair and beginning to scan the area of the room behind me with a moderately paranoid expression. What are you looking for? The light in the back left. It's flickering. He huffed while reaching into his jacket for something. It wasn't until now that I noticed a sizable imprint in his jacket. I stood up and placed myself in front of him, attempting to diffuse his angst and not draw attention in our direction. Would you chill out? I whispered. People are gonna think you're nuts. No, they aren't. Have a look for yourself. I hesitantly turned my head. The library was just the same as it had been minutes prior, but every single person was frozen with the exception of Ethan and I. It was like they had all been stopped in time. None of them even blinked. They were complete statues. Don't move, Ethan demanded, reaching into his jacket and pulling out an almost alien-looking weapon. I had rationalized it as being just a heavily modified shotgun with red rings around the barrel and some sort of cylinder containing a strange purple liquid hanging from the bottom. The light in the back Ethan had talked about flickering was beginning to spread to the rest of them. They all hummed and buzzed violently as they flashed in and out simultaneously. Now the whole interior was starting to become an epileptic person's worst nightmare. And the flickering of the lights made me come to a horrifying realization. I could feel my stomach churning. Are they here? I asked as I darted my eyes frantically around the room, holding out hope that now frozen people would start moving once again. What do you think? Ethan replied rhetorically without even looking back. Just try not to crap yourself. Last thing you want to do is let them know that you're scared. Yeah, because I'm sure they don't know that already. I clapped back. Aren't you supposed to be the professional here? The lights now all flickered at the same time. The bookshelves began to shake as the floor now rattled. Books fell off the shelves and the chairs were tipped over. I could feel the air become icy cold, as the eerie hum of the ceiling lights only became louder. You need to get out of here, Ethan demanded, putting a hand on my shoulder and trying to force me out of my spot. How? We're trapped. My best chance is here with you. I said go, Ethan snarled. The lights flickering came to a climax when it became too intense and they exploded. Shards of glass and plastic fell to the carpeted floor while the darkness flooded the room as a result. The light coming from the windows was covered with a sheet of powerful darkness. The opposite half of the room was completely drenched in a pitch-black abyss. Even Ethan seemed to not know what was going on. I was terrified. I could feel my hands shaking intensely. In the dark half of the room, 8 different pairs of red glowing dots stared fixed on us. I couldn't take my eyes off them, not even for a second. They didn't move, make a sound, or speak. They simply continued to glare hungrily at us. I looked down at the floor and nearly screamed as I saw the darkness itself moving. It freaking moved, slithering across the floor as if it were given a body. I attempted to speak and scream, but no noise came out. My throat was closed up from the undeniable panic I was feeling. I thought I was gonna die there and then. "Stay back," Ethan commanded as the darkness continued moving its way towards him while he tried to fire his weapon, only for nothing to happen. He tried a couple more times to be faced with the same result. I had felt stupid for relying on him in the first place up to this point. What the hell?" he cursed. Haunting laughter came from the darkness. It was a combination of multiple bone-chilling cackles. They were sinisterly taunting, some laughs being children, some being men, and some were women. The red dots slowly hovered forward through the dark, getting increasingly closer to Ethan and I as the pitch-black, almost liquid-like darkness swallowed up the rest of the room. It was closing in on the both of us. All we could do was watch and listen. Ethan attempted to fire the weapon one last time, and just like the previous efforts, nothing ended up happening. The only difference was that I was seeing a look of panic beginning to spread across his face. It only made my blood freeze even colder. Everything I knew about him so far told me that he wouldn't be afraid of anything. "I thought you could handle this." I shoved him, anger now coinciding with my terror. The void of darkness was now beginning to touch my feet. The volume of the horrific laughter increased as the glowing red eyes were now less than 10 feet away. It felt like this would be the end. I wanted to simply drop to my knees and give up, as a horrible death slowly advanced towards us. I felt helpless in a way I couldn't put into words. Ethan was the first to go. The darkness pulled around his feet. He looked at me with nothing but despair and desperation in his eyes, as he was suddenly snatched right in front of me. He didn't have time to scream. Not at first, at least. Once he had been consumed and pulled out of sight by the darkness, his screams were ear-shattering. I couldn't hear any sounds of him being maimed or harmed, but it was hard to distinguish these shrieks as being a result of paralyzing terror or pure agony. I chose the former. 2 pairs of the red eyes now stepped in place of where he once stood. His blood-curdling screams were suddenly and violently cut off, after continuing for over 20 seconds. All I could think about was the potential horrific things they had done to him, along with the fact that I would very soon be next. The darkness had now reached me. It began to surround me, consume me, and I was left with nowhere to go. I was sure that this would be my haunting demise, getting taken by these red-eyed shadow beings, the same as my cousin once had. I was fully surrounded by the darkness and I felt something grab me. It was hard to describe, but whatever snatched me up felt like it was all around me, everywhere at once. The grip of it was cold, similar to that of sleeping outside nude during a blizzard. I began to scream as I could feel the chilling sensation run its way through the inside of my body. Nothing but skin-numbing cold was all I could sense. I continued my shrieks as it kept spreading. The process was slow, agonizing in a manner no torture could ever compare to. I was miraculously lucky I was even able to open my eyes for a split second. All around me, I saw the Nocturnals. Their figures were still pitch black and details completely obscured, but their eyes were now white instead of red, and it hurt me to look at them. I covered my eyes as I continued bellowing my lungs out to my chest. "Assimilation," the voices of the Nocturnals chanted as they all surrounded me. Over and over again as the feeling of that same overwhelming chill spreading through my veins finally came to a merciful end. It was only seconds after when I had passed out. When I awoke, I took a deep breath. I was in my room and the lights were off and everything was eerily silent. Morning light was leaking through my curtains, but they were shut. The main thing racing through my mind was how I even woke up in the first place and how long I was out. Why was I even still alive? I should have been freaking out much more than I was. That's what I thought anyway. I exited my bedroom and marched down to my bathroom. The light was already on, which irritated the morning grog in my eyes. I quickly switched the light off, only letting a small amount of it seep in through the window. I looked in the mirror to see that I was completely unscathed, save for my crimson, bloodshot eyes and a few bruises on my forearms. I had wondered if the same had happened to Ethan. I pulled out my phone and attempted to call him, only for it to go to voicemail several times. That was when I was going to try to call the police and to file a missing persons report, right before noticing the time and immediately spiraling into a shallow pool of stress. It was only minuscule compared to what I felt when this situation usually occurred. "Crap," I said. "I gotta go to work." When I spoke, my voice was enhanced, amplified, whatever you would call it. I said a couple more words and phrases just to make sure what I was hearing was real. Every little noise or verbal outburst I created had echoed throughout the walls of my house. I did everything in my power to chalk it up to my mind and senses being distorted from what had taken place. It was still fresh in my mind. Yet even though I couldn't stop replaying it in my head, I didn't feel as strongly as I should have. As mentioned before, I grabbed my shoes and got on my car before hesitantly driving to work. Stepping outside was harsh. It didn't burn exactly, but it caused me moderate internal irritation. I felt out of place from the moment I woke up. Seeing Sherry at work didn't change a thing. I didn't care much for her presence. Every word that came out of her mouth was over my head. I paid her next to no attention. That is until she uttered the words, "Ryan, why are your eyes so red?" In my mind, I thought her question was trivial and maddening. I turned and simply looked at her without saying a word. I just stared into her eyes as I reached over one of the shelves. "Hello," she persisted. "Ryan, are you okay?" Once again, I ignored her. I went about the rest of my shift, half-assing nearly everything I did. I couldn't wait to get home, turn off the lights and relax. The store wasn't even busy by an average day's standards. Nonetheless, I was beyond exhausted. Arriving home that evening, strange feelings and emotions rose inside me as nighttime approached. The light was seriously starting to hurt my eyes. I really needed to dim it. I'm going to finish writing this now. The light from the screen on my laptop is slowly becoming a burning sensation and I can't take it anymore. I don't want to look at the screen for a second longer. But tonight, I'm gonna pay Sherry a visit. These voices, they've been encouraging me to do so. One of them even sounded like Carl, just like him, but distorted like me. I kinda like it that way now. It's soothing. The dark isn't so bad, you know. Maybe everyone should take the time to shut their lamps off and find the peace that doesn't exist with the light. The light is overrated. The night shift. We all know it, we all dread it, and we all hear about it. Some enjoy it. The peace and quiet of it all. It soothes them. And those people might listen to music, scary stories, or whatever else is available while completing some arbitrary task their boss made up for them. Being a young woman who works as a night custodian in an office building, things can get quite strange, as well as exhausting. And no, there are no strange rules, guidelines, or instructions to follow. No sheets of paper with directions on them that would make anybody quit on the spot. But there is definitely more to my job than meets the eye. and I'm here to tell you all about it. These are the things that happen in this building. Things that I'm sure most people won't believe. Things that actually would send most folks running. It's safe to say a good majority of humans have a fear of the dark, or at least are hesitant when in dark spaces, especially when those dark spaces are in unfamiliar locations. Now, while the lack of being able to see anything in front of you is already alarming, it's what's potentially in the dark that we fear. Something that wants to cause us harm or make us suffer in ways that we have no previous conception of. A serial killer, an inhuman beast, something tall and lanky with no face. The list goes on. But what truly matters is that darkness is the ultimate weapon. Vision is extremely important to humans. If you take away our most important sense, we have a hard time getting by without taking the time to adapt to said circumstances. People who rely on being able to see their whole lives don't want that to suddenly slip away in the blink of an eye. But unfortunately, it does happen. More than we would like. The Nocturnals. The darkness is theirs, and they've claimed it. I don't know where they came from or how they began. There isn't a whole lot of information on them to begin with, because most people who get the chance to learn a decent amount ends up becoming one of them. That's right. Their red eyes glow brightly, but are still subtle enough to go unseen by someone not paying attention. Their figures are completely pitch black, just like the darkness they choose to reside in. They're not shadows exactly, but I wouldn't call you stupid for thinking they were. They control darkness. The more of them there are in a certain area, the more that they can use it, manipulate it, and apply it almost any way they like. They do speak and have voices. They sound mostly like they did when they were still human, just far more distorted, echoey if you will. They always choose the darkness. And let me tell you right here and now that it will take far more than a simple flashlight to stop them, especially when they're in a group. Turn on main lights, ceiling lights, high-powered lamps, anything you can to fight it, and only leave your home or places of comfort during the day. Better yet, stay in groups yourself as well. Now should you become engulfed by their powers and snatched up by one of them, you will be added to their ranks and will only seek to carry out their mission. Your human compassion, empathy, and emotions will fade, but something else will replace it, something far more sinister. A love for the darkness, the urge to spread it, to turn others into the blackened body, glowing, red-eyed creatures. And that's it. Any semblance of who you once were, gone, never to return. Forget holy water, crosses, or anything along those lines. They won't help you. I've seen others try. It never ends in their favor. Now, why do I work a job where I'm at risk for pretty much all of this? Well, it's because I kind of have to. For starters, I'm not the only so-called custodian that works in this building. There's 4 of us. First, there's me, Millie. The job itself came to me once I had completed what I needed for qualifications. A man dressed in a pristine gray suit, aviators on, and his hair slicked back had left an envelope on my doorstep. If he truly didn't want me to see him, then that would have been the case. But I know that he did. And that's why he took his sweet time getting me into the back of a black SUV, parked down the road. The windows tinted as well. I could even see that dang thing was armored, which didn't surprise me, considering it was already shady enough up to that point. Furthermore, I picked the envelope up, turned it down to its backside, and read a sentence written in black, bold text. Don't call the police, because the police answer to us. It seems like they had thought of everything. I took this as a sign that I had practically no choice but to open it up, as much as I didn't want to. I wasn't very graceful. I simply snapped the fold open, finding what looked to be a printed photo inside. I grip it steady, the temperature of it still warm as I begin to pull it out, letting me know the photo was still fresh and hadn't been around for very long. Once it's separated from the envelope, I swap it around for the blank, white side to the actual contents of the picture. The paper gave off a smell resembling to air freshener, likely Febreze, which was strangely the most odd thing about it. Immediately, my blood freezes when I see the image. I step inside, my hand shaking as I put it on the knob to shut my front door. Tears forming in my eyes as I feel my grip on the picture begin to slip away. The picture is of my middle-aged mother, restrained in a chair with a gun pointed to her head. Not just a pistol or what you usually expect. No, this one looked military grade. Something a regular person would have a hard time getting their hands on. I notice at the bottom there is something written in white, almost chalk letters. I glance down to take a peek, the words revealing themselves to be, "From the agency." There was also an address written in the opposite corner, one that told me I must be there exactly a week later or suffer the consequences. So with no choice, I went. What else was I gonna do? If I told anyone, she dies, and like they said, the cops answer to them. So that option was out the door. I was slightly off-put when I showed up to what looked to be a generic office building, something you would see while taking a drive downtown, but this was much more isolated. It was only 4 floors, a brick exterior with a flat, boring roof and crystal clear windows. But there's a very good reason no one is allowed here once it gets dark. I went in, and a strange woman approached, telling me I was going to be interviewed for one of the open custodian positions, as they suddenly needed it filled. I guess you can infer what that means, but I know it had all been a setup, as I had never applied for a job at this place. Although she did inform me that there would be 3 others with me, so thank God I wouldn't be the only one. She had one of the higher-ranking employees of the building come in and give me some sort of weird, almost dare I say, enhanced flashlight, like something you would see out of a sci-fi film. Even she herself didn't seem normal. In fact, there wasn't a single blue-collared person in there. They dressed similarly to the guy who had dropped the envelope off at my house. Instead of just one beam of light, there was 6. All very bright and made a mining helmet look dim by comparison. When I asked why they were giving it to me, their response was simply, "Trust us, you'll need it." And that's pretty much where I am today. Tonight, I'm about to go in for my official 200th shift, meaning I ended up lasting 5 days longer than the man I had ended up replacing. So, bravo to me, I guess. And despite these circumstances, I did end up making friends with one of the other custodians, Tommy. He wasn't anything to write home about. Well, being completely truthful, none of us are. This agency that hired us probably thinks of us as nothing but guard dogs, which we kind of are. Anyway, Tommy, he's a good man. Maybe not the most exciting, fun, or dangerous guy ever, but he's good and good at his job. I'm pretty sure that that's all they care about. For Tommy, they have his son. I'm even sure that one time he attempted to quit and someone from the agency told him they would throw his son to one of the creatures that they have caged. So yeah, that's a good enough motivation to be doing this. Nonetheless, I get to the building, go to the supply closet and get my share of the equipment that I need to clean the 3rd floor. Each of us are assigned to our own floor with walkie-talkies for communication purposes. I take the elevator up to my designated floor, grab my mop and dip it in the bucket. The slight splash destroys the eerie silence of the room for just a second. The water squelches and spreads these soapy chemicals as I move the mop around with a sort of rhythm. Got 2 red eyes down here. Tommy calls in from the walkie-talkie, stuttering slightly as he was the newest out of all of us, only being here for about 20 shifts. I pick my walkie up, pressing the button on the side in order to give my response. Use your light, stay still, and make sure you're near the lit areas of the floor. Don't do anything stupid, I order him, genuinely concerned for the man's safety. Tommy pauses for a second, nothing but the sound of faint breathing coming from the other end for a moment or two. Okay, yeah, I'm all good. They're starting to retreat. Oh, and in case you're wondering, I'm the only one that actually calls them the Nocturnals. I had seen a post online about it. Something about some guy who had been taken by them. That's what he called them in a post, and I really like the name. It sucks what happened to the guy though. And lately, there's been, dare I say, missing persons cases. Lots of them, especially toward the wooded areas. I'm aware that the agency knows about them, but even though I technically am working for them, I don't have high enough clearance for them to tell me what's actually going on. I'm far too expendable for that. But let's be honest, did I really expect some shadowy organization to give me details on more than what I needed to know? Absolutely not. I digress, continuing to mop the floor, leaving my flashlight over by my cart with cleaning supplies and keeping a close eye on it. The squelching of the water and light tapping on my footsteps is the only noise. Nocturnals love quiet places. Quiet, dark places. Trust me when I say that you would never have to worry about them showing up at a frat party or anything along those lines. That's unusual behavior for them. Whoa. I heard one of the custodios radio in, his voice hoarse, like he had just gotten over a sore throat. More than a few red eyes on me, don't worry. I got this. They aren't scary in the least bit. That slightly cocky guy would happen to be Mark Sanchez. Unlike Tommy and I, Mark hadn't had any of his family taken. He himself was sort of a mystery. And to us, I mean not the agency. But he did inform us why he was here. From what he constantly told us, the agency had threatened to leak some sort of incriminating info about him. Something really bad, whatever it was. I prayed to the Lord that it didn't involve kids. He wouldn't go on about the details though. Might have bit off a little more than I can chew, Mark announces. I could only help but smile, soon as he finally said something humbling. Talking about something other than his playboy ways or how much he could drink in one sitting. I pick up my walkie, raise it to my lips as I press the button to speak. It crackles to life as I lean closer. Mark, I snarl. Mark, you alright? What's going on down there? No response. Nothing but heavy breathing. Immediately, my heart begins to race. Admittedly, it wasn't because Mark might have been dead. Not directly anyway, but they may have gone to him and turned him. The last thing we needed was another nocturnal to deal with. Mark, I swear to God you better answer here, you freaking idiot. Tommy chimes in, his haste even more potent than mine. I'm gonna go upstairs and check on him. Wilson radios in. Wilson was the oldest and most experienced out of us. And being in his late 50s, the guy was well built and put together, which isn't hard to picture when you realize he was an ex-Marine. I can't imagine what scares you after constantly being under the threat of getting blown up or shot. He was confident, not cocky like Mark though, but he knew what he was capable of handling. As to why he was there working for the agency, well, let's just say that he may or may have not committed a war crime. Yeah, I don't know the details, but from what little he's mentioned, it can't be good. I'm coming too, I respond, grabbing my flashlight off my cart and heading towards the elevator, wasting no time at all. No, Wilson shouts. Stay up there. Don't need them crowding more than one floor. Of course, me being a young, rookie female at this job wanted to prove myself. I didn't listen. If I could go back and change it, I would. Older people aren't right about everything. But usually if they tell you to stay away from something, it's probably in your best interest to do so. They may have had to learn the hard way, and you might next. I slam my palm on the down button on the elevator. Tommy radios into me as I do so, his speech slow and doubtful. You don't think they got him, do you? I don't know, but I can't let Wilson go onto that floor alone. The elevator arrives and I hop in, turning and rapidly mashing my fingers against the button for the floor below. No, dang it. I said don't come here, Wilson exclaims after a heavy breath, indicating that he had just run up these stairs to get to Mark. When the elevator door opens, I practically throw myself out of it and into Mark's floor. It was what you would expect. A simple copy and paste of the other three. Chairs, desks, and computers spread all around a simple rectangular expanse. Mark was backed up in the far right corner, cowering in fear. So much for the whole tough guy act, but I secretly expected it anyway. Insecure people always have something to prove. The lights were flickering violently, more than I had ever seen them do before. As if someone was repeatedly flipping the light switch as fast as they possibly could to set a world record. Toward the far end of the room were 5 different pairs of glowing red eyes, coming from a pitch-black wall of darkness. The Nocturnals, of course. They were staring down Mark, seemingly intrigued and simultaneously excited about his vulnerable state, knowing that he was in no position to fight back. Wilson burst in the room from the left through the stairwell, his enhanced flashlight already turned on. He was always ready for a situation gone wrong, and this time was no exception. I followed his lead by reaching down and quickly switching mine on. Mark, on the other hand, he seemed to not have his, considering how desperate he truly looked. "Where's your light?" I erupted, darting across the room in his direction. They snatched it. I was cleaning the break room and the dark swallowed it," he panicked, backing up harder against the wall behind him. I could hear his voice crack as he sounded on the edge of tears. "You're a freaking idiot. Lucky I don't knock your jaw into your brain," Wilson snarls, turning and pointing his light toward the opposite end of the room. Mark was right. The wall of darkness was moving, slowly inching toward us like magma sliding down the side of a freshly erupted volcano. Little by little, it covered the floors, walls, and ceiling. All the pairs of red eyes moved within the darkness, levitating forward right towards us. Our lights beamed brightly and lit the far end of the room up. Well, they did somewhat anyway, and it was enough to help drive the Nocturnals back. But something about them seemed different. They were stronger, more resistant. The darkness itself continued to move toward us despite our best efforts, albeit a bit slower than before. "This is not your hour, Mark," came all the different voices, a mix of both adult and child, male and female, distorted beyond what a human should sound like. That wasn't even mentioning that it came off like a loud whisper. Wilson and I moved up toward the black wall with our lights, toward the pairs of red eyes, toward the Nocturnals. They backed up inch by inch, but a pair of eyes began to break off from the 5, moving to the right inside the wall of darkness, which of course was where Mark was isolated. The flickering of the lights in the room lit up slightly. It seems as if for the time being we were winning, but even then they had never put up this much resistance in the past, so it was still really alarming. My heart was racing with adrenaline pumping through me. "Come on, you shadowy freaks," Wilson roared with combated pride. "You guys have got to be the biggest idiots ever. We need to get out of here," Mark exclaimed from the corner behind us, still shaking like a frightened child. I can't do this anymore. You guys need to hurry up and do something. I can't die because of you morons. Save me, please. We need to run." "No, we can't let them get out and spread to the residential areas around here." I replied rather harshly without turning around. "Oh, shut up, you freaking baby," Wilson snapped, punctuating by gritting his teeth. We had nearly pushed the Nocturnals all the way back. Soon, we would drive them back far enough that the threat would be eliminated for now. That is, until I heard Mark let out a blood-curdling shriek, one that could not possibly be faked. It was easy to assume something had gone horribly wrong. I did a quick 180, spotting Mark dashing from the corner, attempting to run away, the ceiling lights above him flickering on pace with his movements across the room. He ran up to the elevator, slamming his hand on the buttons until they were nearly smashed to pieces. And because of my turning around and shining the light elsewhere, the wall of darkness Wilson and I had worked so hard to drive out immediately began to come back, slowly advancing near us. Except there was one less pair of glowing red eyes this time, 4 instead of 5. "Millie!" Wilson shouted, and for once, there was actual fear in his voice. True, grandiose, existential dread. Hearing it only made me all the more terrified. I was stuck between a rock and a hard place. The elevator door had opened in front of Mark, both of them slowly and menacingly sliding into the gaps, only to reveal a dark, empty space, with 2 red glowing dots inside the box hovering at eye level. The elevator itself was there. Only one of the Nocturnals had made it in there before poor old Mark, who of course was caught completely off guard. Since he was within range without a powerful enough light source to protect him, Mark was suddenly snatched into the void-like space of the elevator. It was silent at first. It always is as soon as they grab you. But then he began to scream like a damned soul in hell, endlessly wailing and crying out before being muffled out by the elevator doors closing. "No, no help! Please help!" he shrieks, sounding much more like a little girl than a grown man. I turned around and held my light in front of me in order to assist Wilson. Mark was now gone, lost to the Nocturnals and now fated to join their ranks. There was nothing that we could do. But once again, they fought back against Wilson and I. This time, the black wall went around the area of our light source, as if they were attempting to flank. I'm here," came Tommy's explosive outburst. He dashed in from the stairwell door, panting and gripping his light device. "Well, don't just stand there like a rag doll. Hurry up and help," Wilson barked at him. Tommy switched his light onto full power as Wilson and I had done, turning his back to ours and focusing on the darkness that was beginning to lurk behind. "They've never fought this hard before. What's going on?" Tommy cried out, reiterating what Wilson and I were already thinking. "I don't know. We just gotta drive them out of here and then survive until sunrise." With Mark now dead in one of the floors left to the eventual takeover of the Nocturnals, it clicked in my mind that we would soon be sent a replacement. The agency didn't really value human life all that much, but I'm sure them taking our innocent family members as hostages probably already conveyed that. Soon enough, the wall of darkness was pushed all the way back, and by extension, the Nocturnals lurking inside it, the red dots dissipating as it faded. We were safe for the time being. And we went back to our respective floors in order to check if any activity had occurred while we were all busy on Mark's. Thank God there wasn't, or we would have been in serious trouble. When the morning came round, it was blissful, cathartic, giving me a feeling of relief that I didn't think was possible with a job like this. And not to that degree anyway. Wilson did call the agency and let them know about what had happened to Mark. They told us that they already knew about it and to stay put because they'll be coming over soon to assess the damage, as well as figure out our next replacement. Meaning they were going to find some other person, kidnap their relatives and force them to work here during nights, just like us. Maybe they wouldn't, but that seemed unlikely. Luckily, it was a Saturday, so the normal, everyday people who had no idea what was going on here weren't coming in for work. Wilson, Tommy, and I all look out the window to see 3 different armored SUVs all pulling up on the street below. The doors swing open and a variety of personnel step out. 2 were what I assumed to be security, although they were definitely more geared than your average security guard. Dressed in all black with body armor and fully automatic rifles slung around their torsos, they both appeared ready to take on a small army. I could make out a more curvy figure underneath the gear of one of them, indicating it was a woman. Out of the second SUV stepped an older-looking man dressed in an extremely expensive-looking suit and tie. No wrinkles, no stains. It was pretty much in perfect condition from what I could tell anyway. And then, from the third and final vehicle emerged a man similar in age to the one in the suit, probably in his late 40s or so. He wore a simple outfit consisting of jeans, sneakers, and a long-sleeve gray wool shirt. They entered the building and took the stairs up to our floor, not wanting to risk taking a chance of encountering the Nocturnal that had assimilated Mark, due to the lack of light inside the actual box of the elevator. When they enter, I hear both the man in the suit and the one in the gray sweater loudly arguing over something that I had no knowledge of. "No!" erupts the man in the suit, ferociously pointing his finger at the one in the gray sweater. "This isn't what you went through. It's not that peril crap. I'm not wasting resources recapturing him anymore. He's gone. He made up his mind and clearly doesn't want to follow our orders anymore. So he'll die instead." "But sir," the gray sweater man shoots back, his demeanor much more calm than the man in the suits. "He's way more useful to us alive. Tell X1 not to kill him. They'll end up killing Dr. John too." The man in the suit turns around, flashing in gray sweater a look of utter ridicule. "Oh right, because I'm sure you care so much about John. Screw John. I've never seen you even talk to him. They both need to die. He's getting too dangerous and is learning too much. End of story. I'm not arguing anymore." Defeated in the verbal battle, the man in the gray sweater simply sighs and rolls his eyes before reaching into his pocket to retrieve a notepad and pencil. He then begins to scan the room, walking around to look at things and take notes of whatever he sees. The man in the suit now approaches Wilson, Tommy, and I, reaching out to shake his hand. "Hey, Director of Operations, but just call me Ted," he says, introducing himself with not much flair or excitement. "We've been waiting on you," I said bluntly, matching his lack of exterior emotion. "How many more nights do we gotta keep coming here? Are you ever gonna let my mother go? She's innocent and didn't do anything." And Ted groans, not even attempting to hide his irritation at my probing. "You know, I could just kill you and your mom and be done with it, right? You're lucky I'm even wasting resources feeding and keeping her alive. I'll just find somebody else who knows when to shut up and quit asking questions." Rage quickly rose inside of me. It took every ounce of willpower that I had to not strike this sociopath right in his mouth. There he was, standing there taunting me about my still captive mother, making vicious threats because he knows he's got meatheads with guns to protect him. A typical coward. "I don't care what your title is. You need to watch how you're talking to people." Wilson steps up, marching toward the director. "Man, you were supposed to be dead a while ago. You want to make that a reality right now?" Ted fires back, calling one of the armed personnel over. He quickly paces across the room, standing next to Ted and pointing the barrel of his rifle right at Wilson's head. Wilson is of course unfazed, but he still doesn't try anything stupid. "That don't scare me. I've had one too many guns pointed at me in my years. You're gonna have to do better than that," he taunts, only inviting more conflict. I would be lying if I said I wasn't morbidly entertained. "Wilson, Tommy says, trying to intervene, only to be cut off by Ted holding up a finger in the air. signaling for him to be quiet and stay out of it. "You're right. My threat seems too hollow, doesn't it?" Ted asked rhetorically, before motioning to the armed agent once again. The agent then suddenly takes one hand off his rifle, it now only being held with his left. With his free right, he launches a sudden swing at Wilson, hitting him in the chin with a hostile right hook. Wilson slightly stumbles to the side and regains his balance before almost falling onto his back, using his sleeve to wipe away some blood from his bottom lip. "Hey, what the heck?" I shout, inches away from shoving Ted myself. "It's fine," Wilson retorts. "He's just showing he was too wuss to hit me himself." All right, enough." Tommy steps in, darting his eyes between all of us. "Let's just try and wrap up at least one problem without violence." "That's all these idiots know is violence," I reply. "We're here in the first place because of violence. Oh, and guess what we're doing? Pretending to be regular custodians so we can prevent violent things from happening to innocent people. Where do you get off choosing what folks get caught up in your web of shady BS and which ones don't?" I finish once again, glaring at Ted with a murderous stare. I can't help it. Something in me snaps like never before. I basically become a walking tirade of bottled up despair and fury. Despair and fury that was now being unleashed with no filter to accompany it. "You act like you're vigilantly protecting the world, but no. I know what you are, what your whole organization is. Nothing but a bunch of cowards sitting behind computer screens and guns. You can't do the dirty work yourself, so you get others to." Ted was unbothered by my vicious ranting. He simply crossed his arms and stood patiently, as he waited for me to finally shut up and quiet down. "Are you done? Because we have things we gotta get done today, and I don't have time to sit around and talk politics," he adds, pausing for a moment to call over to the guy in the gray sweater. "Hey Tin, why don't you come walk with this lady and get the story of what happened here? She seems to need to cool off anyway." After he said it, I clenched my fist. I was never a person who had gotten into many fights my whole life, but I was by far willing to make an exception for this jerk. He was pulling my strings onto every last nerve. However though, I don't. Keeping my hands to myself and putting self-control in the forefront of my mind, not wanting to make a stupid move that could potentially get me beaten, tortured, or worse. Tin and I take these stairs down and exit the building to take a short walk along the road, while I recall the events of what happened. Everything from the Nocturnals seemingly becoming more adaptable to our weapons up to Mark's foolish yet unfortunate death. Through all of it, he listened and did it well. A trait you don't see very often in a lot of people, especially when it's something that they don't want to hear. But then again, I'm sure that it was his job. "What's your assignment with him anyway?" I ask. "You like a reporter or something?" He smiles, putting his pencil away and closing up his notepad. No, a researcher. There's definitely better jobs out there, but the pay is what truly makes it worth it. Trust me when I say I don't trust the government or people of their type just like you do." "Then why do you work for them?" I inquire. "Well, my alternative was death, so not really much of a choice. Plus, living in the facility is way better than in the middle of the woods, especially where I was at. I can't complain about the food and rec room. I've been hounding Ted to let us bring Ben & Jerry's in there, though he won't bite." I stop walking and he does as well, both of us turning to face each other. There is an underlying hint of mutual understanding. "What was so wrong about living in the woods?" I ask, causing him to rest his eyebrows, my question inoffensive. "It's a long and I mean long story. Point is that I want to help people, protect them against all these strange, harmful forces, which I can do with all the resources they provide me with. But don't get me wrong, Ted is a moron. Yeah, he technically gave me the job or whatever, but you're far from the only one that doesn't like him. Being in charge already makes you prone to ridicule, but he practically asked for it. I decide to change the subject, now genuinely enjoying my time with the man in question. "Is Tin your first name?" I quiz. "No, it's my last. I'm just not a big fan of my first. I got teased about it quite a lot in grade school. Kids were a lot more brutal back in the day. I can still count all the times I've had other people's food dumped on my head, but all the lunch money stealing brutes. You'd be surprised when you got social media, the bullying doesn't end at the school doors." Yeah, that's a fair point. But I'm sure you didn't just want to ask me about the things you could read on my birth certificate. So go ahead, shoot. All in all, I didn't have much else in mind that I wanted to question him on. The objective of our walk had been carried out already, but I wanted to delay having to go back and hearing Ted run his mouth some more. I hadn't even been around him that long to begin with, but this already felt like a huge breath of fresh air. "You said that you lived out in the woods, correct?" "Yeah, why?" "How did they find you? The agency, satellite imagery or something?" And Tin chuckles, taking a second to glance at the ground and shake his head before answering my question. "No, I was making some posts online. Some posts pertaining to the situation. It caught their attention, I guess. But like I said, a long story I don't think you want to sit through. But we should get back before Ted loses it. His patience runs low pretty quickly if you haven't noticed." I audibly groan as he spills the beans, informing me about the one thing I didn't want to come to fruition. It's like getting told to do chores as a kid. It's inevitable, but never enjoyable. So we went back. And Ted scolded the both of us for taking too long. Not that I expected anything different if I was being totally honest. I literally said, "Thank God," out loud as they loaded their gear back into the SUVs and drove off. As I also clearly wasn't the only one feeling that kind of satisfaction. It was all over Wilson and Tommy's faces as well. As for the situation on our replacement, they said we would have one by the time the weekend came to an end. I guess taking people captive as insurance doesn't take very long for them. The three of us went home to enjoy the rest of the day until we had to return that same night. I immediately kicked my shoes off and went to the fridge looking for something I could put together for a meal. I scanned both the top, middle, and bottom shelf, quickly becoming clear that I was in dire need of a trip to the grocery store. And that's not to mention I didn't feel like spending an extra money on delivery services and shipping fees. So, I figured I would go out to get my food from McDonald's or something along those lines. It was cheap, easy, and quick. Closer in line to what I had the energy for. I take the drive there, going on the more scenic route to make it feel that much more special. It's not all that bad though. Some of the architecture of my neighborhood is quite unique. Plenty of designs that you don't see in most places. It's still a decent distance from the office building though. And my neighborhood was much more lively with people. Kids outside in their driveways, dads working in the yard, stuff like that. The kind of life I wished I had. I pulled up to the drive-thru, ordered my food, and waited in a small line for the first window to pay for what I got. A large dumpster sits off to the right side of my car, one slot open and the rest closed, making the inside of it dark, really dark, far less lit than it should have been. Looking out my windshield, the cars in front of me are still, no lights on and not moving, nothing coming out of the exhaust pipes. I take another glance back at the dumpster. 2 red, glowing dots sit inside it, watching me and not moving in the slightest. They continue to stay fixed on me for what I can only describe as nearly a minute. I don't blink or draw a breath. I just simply stare back. There's a silence. Time seems to stop almost completely. In fact, the world itself stops, and so does everything in it. Luckily, the Nocturnal doesn't move forward. the sunlight preventing it from exiting the dumpster itself. Instead, I hear it call to me, speaking in the now far too recognizable distorted voice. Me took me, showed me the greatness of the dark. Leave the light behind, Millie. The light is meaningless, it holds you back. Only may you find true salvation without it. I knew what it was, or rather who it was. The voice sounded a lot more like him once I came to the chilling but rather obvious realization. Mark, or what Mark had become. He was another one of them now. His transformation itself didn't shock me. No, it was the fact he was stalking me. Hunting me specifically. Something the Nocturnals only really did when going after a specific bloodline of people. But it wasn't impossible. Like I said, we didn't know too much about them, so maybe it was something that I had missed. But what I did know was that he wanted my attention. He wanted me to be scared, but I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. He was limited in the daytime, so I was safe for the time being. The car behind me beeps impatiently, causing me to jump in my seat. I turn my head to lay eyes upon the culprit. A man in a white Volkswagen slams his palm angrily against his steering wheel. Come on, lady, you're holding everybody up. I want my dang Big Mac. I pull further up, grab my food and drive off, scarfing it down with one hand, still held steady on the wheel. It's a little reckless and I usually wouldn't, but it's not like this was a normal day. None of my days for the past several months had been normal. I go home and sleep for the remainder of the day, setting an alarm for 8:30. I needed to be at the office building by 8:45 in order to prepare for the night. I meet Tommy and Wilson in the lobby once I arrive. We grab our lights and gear as we talk about how our replacement will potentially end up being. I hope it's a lady, scoffs Wilson, groaning as he picks up his light and starts inspecting it. It's been a bit of a sausage fest around here. No offense, Tom. Can you not call me Tom? It makes me sound old. Tommy's a bit more youthful. No, it's fine, you big baby. But you'll get there someday. Trust me, and when you do, it'll hit you like a ton of bricks. Wilson retorts. I just hope they're not a complete hollowhead. Not that Mark deserved what he got. I chimed in. I don't totally care if I'm being honest. He made dumb decisions and he paid the price for it. Natural selection just doing its job. Came Wilson's cold reply. It was harsh but correct. Suddenly, we hear the doors swing open. The three of us turn our heads to see a woman enter the lobby. She looks seemingly familiar, slightly above average height with a voluptuous figure. I could have sworn that I recognized her. She possessed short brown hair only going just past her ears, her eyes being the same color. She had this aura about her. It was warming, but yet unsettling at the same time. So, which family members of yours did they take? Tommy probes, skipping the more generic courtesies. You go through any schooling? Wilson says, following Tommy's questioning. Guys, I say, holding up a hand. She literally just got here, give her a second. The woman frowns. Silence falls upon the room. There's nothing going on except the staring between the three of us and her. It seemed almost like she was waiting for one of us to make a move. Well? I ask, not becoming impatient while still maintaining my distance. And then, without speaking or responding to our many courtesies, her eyes shift from brown to red. Her skin slowly transforms into a truly pitch-black palette, the color of a void, a deep, endless void, blacker than space or the deepest reaches of the sea. Her eyes light up, as if she had just flicked on red beams into her skull. And it soon becomes apparent to all of us what she is. Crap, grab your lights, Tommy shouts, retrieving his device and shining it towards the nocturnal woman. But it does nothing. She stands there in her blackened form, Not laughing, moving, or taunting. She just lets us see that she's different from the rest. The fact that she's not like the others. Not in the slightest. Wilson and I both got our lights as well, shining them directly at her. Once again, she doesn't move so much as an inch, only standing there continuously staring us down. I'm not here to hurt you. I want to help you. I know what I look like and what you probably think I'll do, but I can assure you that I'm on your side. I don't think like them. I promise you, she pleads, her voice now distorted like the Nocturnals, far above what it was just minutes ago. Then you better get talking fast, Wilson barks, his no-nonsense attitude emerging yet again. The nocturnal woman holds a hand out and suddenly, all of our lights began to flicker rapidly. Something other nocturnals had never done before. Not with these lights. It wasn't only that, but the fact that she could seem to transform into her human form at will. Usually, once someone became a nocturnal, that was it. That was the end of their previous existence as a human being. The guys in black who hired you, I was one of them. I showed up earlier today with the director. I was one of the ones in the security gear. Your actual replacement. He was supposed to be here. He was just a regular guy like you. But he offed himself, said he would rather die than work for the agency. So, in last-minute desperation, they took me instead. They said they needed something more than just another regular guy with light weapons. She trails off, the pitch black covering over her skin fading away and revealing her human form once more. The one she had when she had walked in. So what did they do? Experiments on you or something? Wilson probes. Sort of. I volunteered to help, but they didn't tell me they would be doing this, making me into a better version of one of them. The director told me to hang up all my gear and weapons and then follow him. He led me to one of the laboratories in the facility. A bunch of the other agents pinned me down and strapped me to a table and injected me with God knows what. Beyond agonizing, I was fighting and screaming the whole time. The way it felt going through my veins, God, I hated it. Every second of it. Felt like they were putting acid inside of me. Don't even know why I'm still alive or whatever this is, she says, looking at both of her hands. I'm sorry, I tell her, I really am. We didn't mean to be so hostile at first. We didn't know all about this. I step forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. I'm not. Wilson steps forward. How do I know you're not playing us? That you're just a more advanced version of them? The red eyes. If I wanted to kill you guys, I would have done it. Granted, I'm still learning how to use these abilities, if that's what you can even call them. But I still would need to remember to kick your butt anyway. Special ops, remember? So I would stand down just a bit if I were you. Wilson lifted his head, letting his chin appear more prominent. I expected him to come back with something harsh or witty, telling her that she's a moron or doesn't know who she's messing with. But instead, he just smirks and laughs. A woman with a fighting spirit. I like it. Anyway, the woman continues. The lab coats studied them as best as they could. They still weren't able to learn all that much. So when they finished injecting whatever it was into me, they took me to a forest where it could get pretty dark even in the day. It wasn't far from the compound. Some of them were there. The red eyes. They practically just gave me to them without a second thought, without knowing the true end result. Of course they took me, snatched me up into the darkness and assimilated me. But it wasn't like the others. I didn't feel like the darkness was my only option. I could still think and process things like my old self. Listen, Tommy speaks up. I'm sorry about all this happening to you, but we still don't know if we can fully trust you. We've just been through too much with those psychopaths, but if you're willing to prove yourself, then I know for a fact that I'll change my mind. As if on cue, The front door bursts open again, and through it comes the researcher in the gray sweater from earlier, Tin. He looks out of breath, wheezing and panting like a dog as he tries to obtain enough oxygen to speak coherently. "They're starting to spread outside of this building and area," he says, lifting himself up and taking a gulp of air. "A couple of them chased me with a wall of darkness, and since it's nighttime, they have a lot more aggro. I know, I saw one when I was going to get food earlier. They're evolving, like she is," I say, pointing to the woman. "We can't let them get that powerful." "You can call me Isabella," she corrects, "and they won't. At least they won't be able to change into their human form or anything that extreme. I don't think so anyway. The stuff they juiced me up with is what makes the difference between us. But as far as how much darkness they can control and how they can move through it, we need to put a stop to that. Who knows how many more are out there, not just here but all around the world." "You guys can trust her," Tin says, stepping forward. "She's telling the truth and got screwed over by the agency." "Who hasn't?" Tommy asked rhetorically. "I'm still learning how to use these powers, and I don't know how much help I'll be," came Isabella's 2 cents. "But I'll do everything I can." "We need everything we can get," Wilson interjects. "So you're gonna have to learn quick, because this is getting out of control." "We can't just sit here and let them spread from this building. Not any more than they already have. If they're tied to this building, bound to this general area, maybe we could destroy it and that would help get rid of them," says Tommy. "If it's their beacon, then we need to take it out of the equation." "I can go into the darkness and try to take them out. As many as I can," Isabella chimes in. "Once I take the form of them, I have their abilities but not their weaknesses. As long as it's not a speshlight, I should be fine." "What the hell is a speshlight?" I quizzed. "The only light that weakens me so far. Even your guys' lights won't do it. It's this weird purple color. I think one of these scientists at the facility said it was created by dark matter. All I know is that, as long as no one has it, I should be okay." "Are we sure we want to straight up destroy the building? I know this is a bad situation and all, but I'm sure we'll piss off Ted by attracting attention," I say, bringing up a valid point. "Screw the agency," Tin remarks. "I'm with them because I have to be, not because I wanna. Most of us in here are. There are no people or other infrastructure within 2 miles of here. We'll be fine." "If we're gonna do this," Isabella announces, "there's enough propane in the basement of this place to blow it sky high." "But not all of us can make it down there. The basement is a dang maze," Tommy adds. "We need people up here as well, making sure they don't escape just in case." Ted and his goons will have some sort of cover story for when this place blows. Either that, or they'll just tell the government to deal with it, Tin adds. "Either way, I think we'll be fine." I dart my eyes between the 5 of us. I obviously wanted the most capable and strong to be with me, which in my opinion was definitely Wilson and Isabella. But that would leave one side more vulnerable than the other. So we needed to strike a balance on the teams. "Alright, I know I don't usually call the shots, but I'm doing it anyway," I proclaim while stepping forward. "Wilson, Tommy, you guys should grab your lights and watch the outside. If they get too far away, then radio me. Tin and Isabella will be going into the basement with me to find the biggest propane tank we can. We'll make sure to do it in a way where we have some time to run out of the building before it blows." "No," Wilson says. "Trust me. The idiot that stored propane tanks in the basement obviously wanted to get someone killed. I'll go down there. I'm not letting you risk your life. You still got plenty of time left on this planet." "It looks like you really do have a heart after all," Tommy jokes. "Oh, shut it," Wilson barks back. "Wilson, you can't. Trust me, I'd try to get out before Wilson holds up a hand. I've only got a couple of decades left. Definitely done some things even my mama would disown me for. And just in case I don't make it out, tell that toe-kissing Ted I said good riddance and next time you see him." "Isabella can come with you," Tommy says, fighting Wilson's conviction. "No, we need her up here where most of the red eyes are. Now hurry up, grab your lights and get moving. We don't got time to argue anymore." He was right, it was nearly 9 o'clock, meaning it was also almost dark enough for them to stand out in the open with no sort of cover. Night was coming in, so were they. As it's already been said, they're evolving and getting smarter. I don't know how or why, but they are. If we don't stop them now, this group at least, who knows what could happen. Even though I didn't choose to be in this position, it now felt like my duty to the world to make sure the Nocturnals don't assimilate all of it. We obviously couldn't account for all the Nocturnals in other places, but this spot was now our responsibility despite none of us truly wanting it. "Ask yourself if you're really willing to die," Isabella says, looking to Wilson. "I went to war more than once. I always have been," he muttered unceremoniously. All of us except Tin and Isabella grabbed our lights off the rack. Wilson retrieves a rather large blade hidden under his pants strapped along the side of his ankle. "Just in case I encounter anything other than the red eyes down there," he informed us. "Would have brought a gun, but they ain't gonna let us have one of those." He then turns and heads for the staircase leading down into the basement, walking with confidence, putting his lack of fear on full display. He was as brave as he always claimed to be. Even though I didn't know what terrible things he might have done in the past, I respected his courage. Tommy, Isabella, Tin, and I all finished acquiring what we need and head outside, right into the proverbial lion's den. The Nocturnals were out there, waiting for us. The streetlights were flickering as they usually would in the presence of these beings. I saw at least a dozen pairs of red, glowing eyes, all of them focused on us, waiting for us to get close enough. "Come join the darkness," they all chanted simultaneously. "The light is a burden," their voices joining together in a shockingly noisy whisper with the decibel level of a shotgun blast. They were lined up along the street. There weren't many other structures or buildings around to provide light beside the lamps themselves. Definitely not enough to stop them. "Oh boy," Tommy says, hesitance present in his tone. "This is gonna be a tall order." Tin got closer to Tommy, indicating he would share the light device with him. "Great," Tin began. "First, I gotta worry about getting flayed alive. And now I have to worry about becoming a freakish nectophile. I guess the universe really isn't my biggest fan." "I'll take the first strike," Isabella adds, stepping forward and changing into her nocturnal form. I lift my light as the other Nocturnals start to levitate towards us within the darkness. I swiftly turn around to notice that they're starting to come from all sides, upping the ante of the situation. We had to take them out here and now before it was too late. Isabella turns and gives me a nod, the glow of her red eyes piercing into my soul. I can't help but find them almost beautiful, at least when they're on her they are. She levitates slightly off the ground, an aura of darkness surrounding her. The battle quickly commences. She destroys the light of the closest street lamp in front of her, shrouding these spots in a void. The other Nocturnals quickly converge on her, attempting to dogpile an attack. She throws them off, but not without a struggle, groaning as I see her tossing them every which way, flinging them like frisbees while they relentlessly pursue her. Isabella then levitates higher into the area of the pitch-black void. I can just barely see the outline of her arms as she waves them around. She was definitely easier to see than the others. I wasn't sure if that was purposeful or not. 6 of the Nocturnals go flying outside of the area towards us, making them much more vulnerable, and allowing the rest of us to move in for the kill. 2 land near me. I quickly leap over and shine my weaponized light device onto them, as they screech and howl, as if they were demons that had just been touched by Christ himself. A few Nocturnals come up on Tin and Tommy. They both stumbled backwards, only just barely avoiding being grabbed and assimilated. I run over to them, shining my lights and pushing the ones in them back far enough to where they aren't a threat, buying them some time to get back to their feet. I found one of the tanks, but there's a good group of them outside the door. Wilson radios in. Not looking too good for me. Use your light, do whatever you can, I shout back. I'm getting to work on heating it up. I'll try to make it out, but no promises. I want you all taking care of yourselves now. Wilson replies, ignoring my attempt at giving an order. As Tin, Tommy, and I all stand back to back, keeping our lights up, Isabella dashes inside a cylinder of darkness, jumping into the air and performing a kick onto one of the Nocturnals, and then slamming together the heads of two more, proceeding to throw their bodies outside the wall of darkness where we can shine our lights on them to finish them off. She maneuvers her way over to the front of the building, raises two shadowy hands into the air, and causes all the lights inside to violently flicker as another batch of Nocturnals come rushing toward her. One seems to get a successful hit from what I can tell, and she slides back several feet but ends up catching herself, getting up and dashing over, grabbing him, and then levitates him up about 100 feet off the ground before spinning like a tornado and throwing him outside of the darkness. I think I'm getting the hang of this, Isabella shouts, the echo of her voice carrying down to the street. They're getting inside, the red eyes, and the lights are starting to flicker and bust in the basement. Wilson radios in again. The tank is almost heated enough. I'm sorry. Wilson, Tommy growls, handing his light over to Tin to hold up as he grabs his walkie-talkie. Come on, you gotta fight your way out of there. Don't just give up. There's a silence at least between us three. Isabella is still dashing around the three of us in a circle, letting out all sorts of battle cries and shouts as she disposes of her nocturnal foes. Get away from the dang building now. Wilson snarls at us through the walkie-talkie. I won't ask it a second time. You better not argue. It's gonna blow. Wilson, Tommy says more softly, attempting to speak before being cut off by a furious Wilson. What did I just tell you, boy? Get running now. Don't make me come back from the dead and teach you how to do what you're told. Tommy and I both exchange a glance, knowing what was to happen. With the Nocturnals more dispersed and less plentiful, we run forward across the street into a low-cut field, being slowed down a bit by our lights. But it doesn't matter. My eardrums were nearly shattered as the building behind us exploded, like an oversized firecracker, sending debris in all directions and throwing the three of us forward. I slide forward a couple of feet along the ground, some grass and dirt staining my cheek and making me gag as some gets into my mouth. A couple drops of blood fall from my nose, making me taste iron as it reaches my mouth. With my ears ringing and my head pounding, I swiftly turn to look back at the smoking, smoldering mess that was once the building. All sorts of charred metal, rock, brick, and pieces of concrete stacked on top of each other. Tommy and Tin both complain quite a bit as they get to their feet, and Tin in particular holding his ribcage due to him being on the older side. You son of a gun, he growls, coughing rather loudly for a few seconds. I look around to see all the Nocturnals near the building almost fading out, looking like glitched items in a video game as they begin to disappear, with the exception of Isabella, of course. We had done it. We had stopped them. I can only help but daydream of all the potential celebrations of the victory, thanks to mainly Wilson and Isabella. But then, I turn my attention forward once again, and in front of me is an area of darkness covering about 10 square feet and standing 7 feet high. And not too far above me is a pair of red, glowing eyes, looking down right into mine. Join us, Millie, he commands, making it clear to me who he was. Mark. He was back and the only one left that hadn't been destroyed or affected by what Wilson had done. I pointlessly get to my feet and try to run, but I am snatched into the darkness by him, unable to escape or move out of his clutches. No, Millie, Tommy cries. Assimilation. A nocturnal Mark says, right before I feel an extremely cold force run itself through the inside of my body, as if someone had just pumped with my blood vessels with liquid nitrogen. The process was beginning. I would soon become one of them. A being, an entity, a demon, it didn't matter. All I know is that my humanity would be drained, and then it would quite literally be lights out. I would be nothing but a red-eyed freak who wanted to drown the planet in a permanent void. But then I hear a passionate cry, only one a warrior charging in the battlefield could produce. Isabella dives into the space of darkness, tackling Mark and stopping my transformation as a result. No, she needs to leave the light behind, Mark bellowed in a hostile tone, returning Isabella's force by seemingly hitting her back. She isn't gonna do a dang thing, Isabella uttered, recovering from the blow and quickly dashing over and grabbing me. She proceeds to lift me up with no strain in her effort and throws me out of the darkness, allowing the space to be a small battleground for both her and Mark. You will pay for what you've done. They need the darkness, we all do. You're a traitor, and I will treat you no differently than one. Mark snarls, levitating above Isabella, displaying that he was almost similar in abilities to her. I can't wait to make you shut your mouth. Isabella booms in return. I'm only inches from the street as I get to my feet, moving out of the way in case Isabella and Mark move the space of darkness in the chaos of their grandiose supernatural showdown for ultimate dominance. Look, Tin shouts. I swerve my head around like a crazed pigeon, looking down the road as 4 different armored vehicles approach the area. The agency. We must have caught their attention. They get closer, one of the SUVs in the front and a semi-truck with a reinforced trailer in the far back. They stop, not too far from us. A bunch of armored security personnel bursting out of the trailer of the semi. Body armor, assault rifles, night vision goggles, and everything. Go, go, go! The one in the front shouts, pacing forward with his rifle held in front of him. But they weren't the only ones. No. 2 guards in what appeared to be these special suits followed them out. And when I say special, I mean they were covered from head to toe in what looked like battle mech suits that you would see in a fighting game, but much more slick and made to fit them more tightly, allowing them more mobility when in combat. Mark and Isabella continued their battle, the area of their fight expanding. They did what amounted to trading blows from what I could tell. Isabella was clearly winning, but not easily. Mark seemingly had her by the throat and slammed her onto the floor before picking her up once again and throwing her towards the edge of the darkness. Isabella caught herself, stopping midair and flying back to Mark at full speed in order to counter what he had done. Now, while Mark had been giving her a run for her money due to these further knowledge of the abilities themselves, Isabella had her previous combative training and raw power to give her the edge. What's with the power suits? Tin yells as Ted gets out of one of the SUVs. When a multi-million-dollar killing machine escapes your custody, you learn to change your strategies up, he replies, no emotion existing in his expression. I had no idea what he really meant, so I simply shrugged his answer off with nothing more than a simple frown. The agents in these suits run toward the darkness, jumping in to assist Isabella, while the ones with the guns and regular body armor stay back, keeping their rifles trained on the spot. There is a struggle. The men in the suits groan and yell inside the black wall before being suddenly flung out of it by Mark. It was clear they were no match for him, and their efforts to assist Isabella were useless. One goes slamming into the trailer of the truck, denting the rectangular-shaped metal with a loud bang, part of his suit cracking dramatically. The other one simply goes straight up into the air above, well above 200 feet before starting to fall back down. But small balls of fire burst out from the bottom of his metallic boots, allowing him to catch himself and fly. Sir, these suits are not equipped for this entity, the one flying in the air says, looking down towards Ted. Ted turns his attention to the armed personnel with the more traditional gear, raising a finger as he screamed a command. Try the ecto-magnets, you idiots. Save your ammo, bullets don't work on them. One of the armed men grabbed a urine-colored, triangular-shaped device from his weapons belt and threw it toward Isabella and Mark. It boomed with a white light, sort of like a flashbang, but nothing came out of it. "I've had enough," Isabella roars, her voice practically shaking the ground as she does so. Suddenly, Nocturnal Mark comes crashing out of the darkness and onto the street, allowing us to attack him in his vulnerable state thanks to Isabella's handiwork. Me, Tin, Tommy, and all the agents focused as much light as physically possible at the time onto him. He screeches and thrashes around, attempting to get away like the rest had tried, his completely dark fingers gripping the wheel of one of the SUVs as he tried to pull himself under the vehicle. "Don't stop until he's gone, men," Ted commands them. Isabella floats out of the darkness, waving a hand and making it all vanish, only leaving behind the natural shade of the night to cover the area instead. And after doing so, she then switches back to her human form, watching us finish off Nocturnal Mark with a satisfied smile. "That was the guy who killed and mutilated my husband. Serves you right, you piece of crap." His screams of pain soon faded as he began to seemingly glitch out of reality and fade away like his comrades had done when Wilson blew the building, leaving no sort of matter or traces of his existence left behind. I couldn't help but release an obnoxious exhale, one that bounced right back into my face due to Tommy running up and hugging me. "We did it," he shrieked joyfully. "I can't believe it. That makes us heroes." "Don't get too comfortable, you idiot," Ted says, quickly shutting us down. "They're still spread out around parts of the planet. They're not gone, far from it. We got rid of one group." "But Wilson," I say, darting my eyes towards the rubble of the office building. "Yeah, that's what happens. If it wasn't this, it would have been the Marines that did him in." I clenched my fist before he even completed his last sentence, and without thinking, I take a swing at Ted, only for my blow to be stopped en route by Tin. I hadn't been thinking. I had just let my anger take over, and I had enough of his mouth, and I know I wasn't the only one. "Don't, it's not worth it," he informs me while looking into my eyes with his face doing the talking. "I'd be willing to make an exception for this numbskull. All of this is because of him. All of it. What he did to us, our families, Isabella. He gave the order, and he needs to pay." I go off furiously. Ted stands not far in front of me, obviously not bothered by my tirade. "You'll get a 20% bonus in your bank account if that'll shut you up," Ted replies. "I want my mother freed. I don't care about stupid money. I want Tommy to have his son back. I want to go back to a normal life." "No," Ted shoots back. "We still have plans for you all. But since you were actually useful today, I'll tell you what. We'll allow you weekly visits with your family members at our Site 12 facility after it's repaired. Of course, both you and Tommy will be blindfolded and sensory deprived on the way there, so you don't know the location." "What do you mean repaired?" Tin says, stepping forward. "I was just there this afternoon. A rogue chopper of ours shot a missile at our weapons room and blew a hole in the side of the building. It damaged our alarm and security breach systems. We're having it fixed as we speak. So when it is, we'll allow you to visit." Ted groans, clearly irritated and not wanting to answer further questions. "I'm not dealing with Nocturnals anymore," I growled. "So you're either gonna have to find me something different or kill me, but you will not lay a finger on my mother." Isabella then approaches us still in her human form, a smile plastered on her face. "I want something for what you did to me back at the facility," she demands. "You just threw me to them, not knowing what would happen. You're a freaking sociopath, even more than Dr. West was." "Watch it," Ted snaps. "And fine, you'll receive a bonus as well, bigger than theirs. But if you try to run or turn on us, I will send every single agent in our supernatural department after you, and everything you hold dear. I've had enough of our experiments running away from us, and I won't let it happen again." "Oh, I see. I'm just an experiment to you," she says bitterly, crossing her arms to punctuate. All those years of being an agent and serving this place, and this is what I get. Tommy then tilts his head as he rests a hand on her arm, doing everything he could to calm her down as he had done with me. I think we could all use a meal. I know a good cafe in town that I go to quite often. They've got great coffee and breakfast. Definitely recommend the eggs and bacon. Tin interjects. Remember your situations and do not try anything funny or we will know. Ted chimes in, eyeing us all. We'll contact you all by next week once this is all sorted out. And wait, there's one thing I bring up. How did you guys show up so quickly and know the building exploded? It was bugged, and not only that, but the cameras are operated by us during the night. So when we heard a boom and then all feed was suddenly cut off, it raised alarms. One more thing, Tommy steps aside. What is it? I swear you guys are gonna make me blow my brains out with all this nonsense. Ted wails. That wouldn't be the worst thing. Tin chuckles. There should be a funeral for Wilson. He sacrificed himself to help us stop the Red Eyes. Take it out of my salary if you need to. Tommy said firmly, no room for any argument. You want to have a funeral for that war criminal? Ted asked, dumbfoundedly. As if you're any better, Isabella remarks. She was right, but I didn't know when this mess would end. The world was becoming stranger and stranger by the second, and I didn't know how to deal with it. But one thing was for sure. This was not the end of this. Any of this. Site 12, December 23rd, 2021. I walked through the Site 12 facility, which had been sparsely decorated with a bunch of Christmas-themed trinkets. It wasn't much, a fake tree here and some lights there, but it's sure more than you would have gotten under Ted Bowser's management. That guy was like a real-life Scrooge. He thought that Christmas time always took away productivity in operations. Go figure. Nonetheless, I make it to the room that I'm looking for. The office of the current director of operations, Jennifer White. You wanted to see me? I asked, poking my head inside as Jennifer sat at her desk, staring at piles of paperwork. I did. Come on in, Ron. She replies, sounding a bit less cold than usual. It sounds like you're feeling good. Holiday season cheering you up. A joke, prompting her to nod her head sarcastically. Maybe it would if I wasn't in here 12 hours a day. But anyway, I've got something for you. She proclaims, reaching under the desk and retrieving a black binder without any markings or labels on it. After opening it up, she turns around, allowing me to see the contents within. One of which was a picture that I recognized. A picture that she had shown me months back after a data recovery mission to a certain bottomless lake. A long story for another time. The surrounding environment depicted in the photo was what looked to be a dark basement, with rusted pipes running along the walls and ceiling. At the end of the room, there were multiple dark pitch black and shadowy human figures, with pairs of glowing red dots where their eyes should have been. The Nocturnals. You showed me this one before, I said. I know, but it's become relevant again. You see, there's been more than 7 reports of missing persons cases lately, she states matter-of-factly. Well, that seems pretty standard to hear about in this job. Not when all these said missing people have all disappeared from one building in a matter of days. I raise an eyebrow, now genuinely curious about what she was referring to. The Landerson Mall closed down just a few days ago to avoid any more incidents. Only us and the federal government are aware of the true details. Even the local police are in the dark about the truth. She pauses for a second. Anyway, from what my superiors have shown me, the Nocturnals are the ones to blame. What exactly did they show you? I can't share most of it with you, but there's a video that was posted to the internet by a friend of one of the missing people. We had the IT team scrub all traces of it from the web before it had gained any notable traction, but I'm sure that it's still out there somewhere. I'm gonna have you help me present this in the pre-mission briefing. Jennifer then moves her mouse around as she stares at her monitor, clicking on a few things and then reaching over and turning the monitor so the screen is facing me. It displayed an MP4 video file and the process of being opened. After said file finishes loading, it expands into a video player display, but the actual footage, it was in the center of the screen in a rectangular formation, giving away the fact that it had been recorded on a smartphone, which is about what I had expected. The location depicted the footage was the parking lot of the mall, filled to the brim with cars, yet seemingly empty when it came to any actual people. The night sky left an ominous darkness over the area. The person recording, who I had deduced to be male, was huffing intensely like he had just got done running a marathon. He gets to the end of the mall's parking lot, with the camera now looking out onto the empty highway. It then suddenly shifts 180 degrees, now back to focusing on the mall and the parking lot. In between some of the parked cars were the Nocturnals. They stood there staring at the camera ominously with their red, glowing eyes. "What are you people? What did you do to Katie?" shouts the supposed cameraman. But he gets nothing in response except the continuous and unsettling stares of the Nocturnals that were sizing him up. The cameraman then begins to swear and curse frantically, the camera movements now becoming shaky and unstable as the Nocturnals begin to slowly move forward, right in the direction of the cameraman himself. "This is not your hour, Leonard," came a supernaturally distorted mix of voices, all of them unifying to make one booming and echo-heavy speech. The cameraman then shrieked, and the camera shifted toward the highway once again as it suddenly started to become larger in the frame, indicating the cameraman was moving towards it at high speed. This only lasted for a few seconds before the video was abruptly cut off, leaving the screen drenched in black. Alright, I'm gonna go ahead and take a wild guess that these things can't be taken down with bullets or grenades, I remarked, much to Jennifer's annoyance. "No, listen, I haven't had to deal with these things before. Last time this particular site did was under Ted. Now, if all the information from the mission report files is true, light-based weaponry will be effective in taking these things down. We tried contacting Isabella Davis for extra help as well, but it seems that she's gone rogue." "Who is that exactly?" "It's a bit hard to explain in a way that sounds logical. She was a former agent with us, and according to some old paperwork, there were some classified tests and experiments done on her during a time where the Nocturnals were a bit more of an issue from previous leadership. To keep a long story short, she became one of them and inherited all of their abilities, while also retaining a human consciousness and thought process." I exhaled, letting all the information sink in for a few moments. "That sounds like some pretty sensitive info. Can I ask why you're sharing it with me? This isn't how our usual meetings go." Jennifer smirks, which again is unlike her, but then she cups her hands together, placing them on her desk and taking a deep breath. "Well, I've been authorized to give you a promotion, Ron, to Assistant Director of Operations, but I will only do it on the basis that this mission is successful. You have proven yourself useful over all the years you've been with the agency, and while you and I have only been personally working together for a short time, your file is impressive, and plus, it'll look good to my bosses as well, training and acquiring new leadership. It's been a while since a site in the zone has had an assistant DO." I sat there in silence at first, unsure of how to take such a revelation. I had been so invested in my position as a mission supervisor that I hadn't taken the time to consider anything higher up. After everything from battling a ruthless subject at 16A in another universe to taking on creatures at a bottomless lake, any plans to climb my way up the ladder hadn't been seriously pondered. If I go up, who replaces me? I ask. That would be Agent Alex. He was only 15 when he was first recruited over at Site 7. He's going to be transferring here in a few months. But due to staffing shortages, he's going to be here for the next few days in order to help us out. He's got a bit of an unusual past, but the less said on that for now, the better. I'll be honest, when I say those last two sentences, it piqued my curiosity, but I didn't want to push my luck with how good a mood Jennifer was in by probing her about it. Can I have some time to think it over after the mission? Yes, Jennifer retorts. But I need an answer from you in writing within the next 2 weeks. Otherwise, my supervisors will force me to revoke the offer. Fair enough, I reply without much flair. The rest of the day goes as usual. We gathered the team and prepared all the material needed for the briefing. Jennifer filled me in personally on a few more pieces of info that I was meant to keep under wraps and not to reveal to the rest of the team. I also went ahead and combed through all the files and paperwork that Jennifer had authorized me to regarding the Nocturnals, and it was pretty much what I had expected. They can control darkness. They convert regular humans into a Nocturnal if they catch them. Yada yada yada. The next day, Jennifer and I led the briefing to Agents Alex, Carter, Melody, Terrence, and finally Garrett. Nothing occurred that was very different than a typical mission briefing, but afterward, we all loaded up supplies in the transport truck, and we headed out to the mall. Even without them saying anything, there was an obvious disconnect between Carter, Garrett, and Alex. While Carter and Garrett were apparently childhood friends from what I had heard, Alex was sort of the odd one out, on a personal level at least. If we can survive the ground grabber, then we can survive some angry shadows, blurted Garrett, prompting a shared chuckle between him and Carter. The heck is a ground grabber? Alex grilled, looking at the other two men with genuine confusion. Something that we dealt with as kids before we joined, or were forced to anyway, Carter replied. So this ground grabber did what exactly? Just hid underneath the floors or something? Snatched you up through your brand new wood tiles? Alex rebuts sarcastically. What exactly got you in here, Mr. Tough Guy? Garrett interrogated. Something that would make the both of you crap your pants and tuck your tails between your legs. Hey, I snap, causing the three of them to go silent. That's enough, it's almost Christmas, so let's cool it with the arguing. In all honesty, part of me was glad that I had an excuse to end their juvenile bickering. But luckily, there weren't any more incidents on the way, as we arrived at the location just a minute later. It wasn't far from Site 12 at all. We all made sure that our gear was loaded up and ready to go. After exiting the transport truck, I and the rest of the team noticed the highway on which we had to come down, and it was eerily empty, which was definitely alarming considering that it was just before Christmas Eve. Not a car in sight, Alex blurts as he grips his weapon, that being a specially designed giant flashlight that weighed over 15 pounds. We pretty much had to carry the things like they were miniguns. They were powerful enough to light up a football field into half when you would turn the adjustable knob all the way up. The brightness level was more than enough to blind a man and then some. It was a big change of pace from the typical firearms and weaponry that we usually brought along on operations. Treat that thing like a gun when it comes to pointing it at people, Melody informed Garrett. Even on the lowest setting, it's enough to cause temporary blindness for up to 48 hours if the beam makes direct contact with your eyes. Noted, Garrett rebuts, seemingly unfazed by what he had just said. I would take it seriously if I were you guys, Terrence interjects. We can't afford one of you losing a vital sense on an operation like this. because you know what that means. Carter and Garrett both roll their eyes, prompting an unfriendly glance from Alex. "I'll make sure to be careful," he says, giving Melody, Terrence, and I a nod of respectful acknowledgement, earning him a look of confusion from both Garrett and Carter. "Alright, let's move forward. Keep your lights off for now. Do not turn them on until I give the okay, you understand?" I grilled. Everyone gave me a nod in response, so I had us all form up and begin moving into the parking lot of the mall. It looked pretty much identical to how it did in the video footage, with a much more noticeable lack of vehicles present, which made sense, seeing as it had been closed for days now to avoid any more potential incidents. I'm sure the place was already drowning in lawsuits. Jennifer had told me that a few of the people who had gone missing inside the mall were kids, so it's safe to say that there were going to be some upset parents. It was eerily quiet in the parking lot, like the kind of quiet people warn you about when you're in a forest, you know, that type. The whole, if you're in the woods and everything goes silent, it means that there's a predator nearby, that kind of thing. But in a place like this, with a parking lot that was only a few dozen feet from a main highway, something clearly didn't add up. I knew that we weren't alone and that it was only a matter of when the Nocturnals would reveal themselves. I figured that for now, it would be best to let Jennifer and company know that we had arrived without incident. "This is Agent Ron. We've made it to the location. So far, no signs of any cryptid activity have been detected." "Got it. Just keep moving forward and keep us posted," Jennifer replied as my radio crackled to life. Usually on these missions, we possessed visor cameras that would allow whoever was back at the site to see what we could see through a live video feed. But Jennifer had informed that we would have to go without them this time and stick with just radios, due to the fact that there had been too many instances of the Nocturnals manipulating and destroying visual equipment specifically. Thus, it was deemed a lost risk, and those things weren't exactly cheap to keep acquiring. I'm surprised the kid in the video even managed to get his footage online after he had escaped. About halfway through the parking lot, I froze, noticing something that caught my eye off in the distance. I squinted and leaned forward, and it quickly became clear as to what it was. Between the gap of a parked green sedan and a black SUV were two red glowing circles about the size of golf balls that pierced through the darkness. And due to the source of said circles being right in front of a black object, they gave off the appearance as if they were floating. "Stop, all of you," I whisper shouted to the rest of the team, prompting them to cease movement as they laid eyes upon the same thing. I kept my eyes focused on the dots while radioed in Jennifer. "Activity spotted, one at least. There's probably more in the area that we haven't seen yet." "Be careful," she replies. "There is most likely more. Make sure the team stays on high alert." I grip my light, getting my finger ready on the brightness adjustment slider as I feel a tap on my shoulder, only to turn around and find Carter kneeling there with a look of terror on his face. "Hey, boss man, might want to take a look behind us," he says, his tone urgent but hushed. And I do exactly that, turning around to find our group surrounded and being looked upon by several of the Nocturnals, with some being a few dozen feet behind us, and another handful being at each of our sides at about the same distance away. They stared us all down, their glowing red eyes fixated on our every move. None of them inched forward to attack, well, not yet anyway. I turned my head to the rest of the team, all of them harboring expressions of extreme concern. "Get your lights ready, but don't turn them on just yet. We need to wait for the right moment. If we get too aggressive right off the bat, they'll come at us all at once," I whispered, signaling for everyone to calmly and quietly get into a circle formation, taking extra caution to make sure that we didn't set these things off. They were intelligent and powerful creatures, Their ability to work in unison and add their victims to their ranks, it was unlike anything that I had encountered in the past beforehand. These beings were the first in a long time to truly terrify me, and I had only been in direct contact with them for a matter of minutes. But possessing the knowledge that I did, it didn't help to comfort me. I knew right off the bat that this mission would be a test of my leadership abilities. After another several rounds of the standoff between us and the Nocturnals, 3 of them from behind began to levitate and float towards us, their menacing shadow bodies cutting through the wind in a horrifically elegant way. The person facing this particular group most directly was Melody, who raised her light with a forceful grunt and reached over to the adjustment slider and dragged it forward, the light explosively bursting out and illuminating nearly everything in her field of view. Her attackers, without an audible cry, moan, or any other verbal sign of agony, shuddered and immediately retreated backward at the sudden extreme illumination, demonstrating that the lights were just as effective as predicted. All of us had crap-eating grins on our faces, as for once we felt in control on one of these missions. It was a euphoria that was nice, but it wouldn't last for very long. Suddenly, all the surrounding Nocturnals began to close in on us, slowly levitating forward just as the other ones had, floating toward us in this chillingly relentless manner, like they were just ghostly Terminators. "Alex, Carter, keep your lights off. Garrett, Terrence, and I will turn them on," I shouted as there was no longer a reason to keep quiet. "What? Why?" Carter blurted, prompting me to give him a stern look. "We can't overdo it and risk damaging our own eyes," I rebutted with a slight snarl. Terrence, Garrett, Carter, and I all switched our lights on, the combined power of the brightness and light blue hue of it all drowning the parking lot, and by extension the Nocturnals, in this almost beautiful ocean-like wave of light. The Nocturnals that had come too close were simply disintegrated. It was like watching water evaporate, and there was nothing more of them where they went, their forms simply being erased and never to be seen again. "Never had it this easy before," Terrence cheered. A smirk formed on his face as he took one step forward with his light in hand. "Hey, easy," I called out. "We gotta make sure we stay in formation." "Hey, we got this, boss man. Look," Carter adds. At this point, we had almost cleared the entire parking lot. With a few more good waves of our lights and simply standing our ground, we had maintained control of the situation. The few remaining Nocturnals all staying put, not wanting to suffer the same fate as their shadowy comrades. So in turn, Terrence was right. But it wasn't like him to get cocky, and it kind of worried me. Meanwhile, we still had to go inside and clear out the actual mall itself. Jennifer had informed me that in order to get rid of a nocturnal infestation, if you will, you need to either destroy the building they were residing in and near itself, or kill every single nocturnal in the area. Which would seem nearly impossible, but with these things, it was much more realistic. But that wasn't to say they weren't still dangerous. They were, no matter how much firepower that we had against them. The few Nocturnals who had survived the initial encounter retreated into the darkness of the surrounding area, presumably heading back to the mall to regroup with all the other ones inside. Once I had assessed that the coast was clear, I turned my attention back to the team. "Alright, lights off, guys," I announced, prompting everyone with the command applied to reach down and adjust their sliders and switch their lights off, leaving the parking lot once again back in an eerie dim light. Nothing but the few lights that were still on inside of the mall, illuminating our path. "Alright," I began. "It seems like we've cleared them out for now, but there will still be plenty more. Make sure that you keep all your heads on straight and don't get too cocky. We still don't know the full potential of what these things are capable of. So let's move on and head inside." After my little announcement, I radioed back to Jennifer and informed her of what went down. She seemed to be genuinely enthusiastic, going on a whole positive tangent about how all the money spent on upgrading the light weapons seemed to be paying off. We all pressed forward as a group. I had the younger guys keeping an eye on our surroundings, while Terrence, Melody, and I maintained a straight line of sight. Every single angle was worth watching when you were up against something like this. Looking up toward the second-floor windows of the mall, I could see that they were suddenly drenched in darkness. Darkness that was only alleviated by the glowing red eyes of the Nocturnals that stood on the other side, staring our group down with a malicious gaze. I counted up all the pairs of eyes to see how many were just in the windows alone. It came out to be just over a dozen when I was finished, which wasn't much more than we had taken out in the parking lot. The difference is, we were in a much less confined space than we would be in there. One of us could easily get cornered or caught off guard if they weren't paying attention. We made it to the outside portion of the main entrance into the mall. I scanned the building now that I was up close for the most part. It was in decent shape other than some noticeable cracks and dents in the building material, which was to be expected. It wasn't a very old building, and it had only been neglected for a matter of a few days. Alright, this is where we really have to watch our backs. We're going right into the nest, and if we don't coordinate and follow orders, then this could end very badly for all of us. I say, getting the team's attention on me, as I had radioed back to Jennifer. We can take these things, it'll be a piece of cake. Alex speaks up, attempting to boost morale, but his efforts seem to turn Garrett's expression sour. Yeah, stroke your ego a little bit harder while you're at it, he mutters under his breath, prompting Alex to snap his head around. What's your problem? Alex grills, keeping calm as he proposed the question. Both of you knock it off, I don't want to have to say it again. I snarl, giving them a look that told them that I was in no mood to deal with it any further. But before another word could be uttered, a thunderous metallic-sounding slam erupted from the interior of the mall, prompting all of us to quickly refocus our attention to where it should have been in the first place. The lights on the first level of the building were still on, but dimly so, which struck me as odd. I thought about why the Nocturnals would allow them to remain in working condition like this, unless it was a trap. Like I said, eyes up, I asserted, just before beginning to lead the team inside. We began at the food court area of the interior. All the vacant restaurants inside felt eerie and desolate, while the main area of the court itself gave off a similar lifeless and liminal vibe. It wasn't dilapidated by any means, but that somehow made me more uneasy. It was all clean and maintained enough to not look abandoned, but still unnervingly empty. It wasn't usually a feeling that I experienced on these operations, but regardless of this newfound kind of distress, I had to keep leading us forward. I wanted just one mission where we all make it out alive. We scoped out the food court and each took a peek into some of the restaurants, seeing what had been left behind in the wake of the sudden shutdown. I hadn't discovered anything notable, just a couple of phones, wallets, and other things that had been left behind or lost. Update me on your status. Jennifer radios in suddenly. None of them in sight, and we're just scoping out the food court for now. Gonna head up to the second floor to terminate the ones up there within the next 10 minutes. I reply, my tone softening as my attention gets grabbed by something else. Just keep moving, we don't have much time. Jennifer retorts in a no-nonsense fashion. I laid eyes on a notebook that was sitting on top of one of the restaurant counters. It looked rather worn down. Even from the distance that I had been standing at, I could tell that it had been used frequently. My first thought was to assume that it was just used by the business as a method of record keeping. But when I walked over, picked it up, and looked at the contents inside, I was given a very different answer. As I said, it was a notebook, but one that was being used as a journal, seemingly by one of the employees who had worked here. Entry 1. December 15th, 2021, 1 p.m. Mike called me in today. Not usually one for working on my days off, but whatever. I'll be getting Christmas off anyway. I was supposed to go to the gym this morning and I didn't, and now the regret is already setting in. I'm gonna get out of this job one day and finally get started on that novel. Like Dad always said, it ain't gonna write itself. I'm gonna try and work up the courage to ask out Laura. Everyone always says to never romantically engage with people that you work with. But it's not like this job is gonna be my career or anything. Plus, the worst thing she can do is say no. December 15th, 2021, 3:42 p.m. Alright, first break of the night. Things are relatively slow. Guess there must be a problem with the power in the back room. The lights keep flickering and it's really weird, and I don't know if I'm losing my mind or whatever, but it's almost like there's a pattern to it. Whatever, I'm probably just looking too deep into it. Mike said that he's gonna have to stay to close down with us. Had a couple of people call off. He's really a decent boss at the end of the day, so I don't really mind. But something seems like it's been getting to him recently. I went into the office to let him know that I had showed up for my shift, and the lights were all off, and he got a little irritated when I turned them on. Says that he can't stand anything too bright at the moment, but he won't tell anybody why. December 15th, 2021, 9:15 p.m. Closing down wasn't as hard as I thought it would be, but something had apparently spooked Laura real bad when she turned the lights off in the walk-in cooler. Told me that she could have sworn something was watching her while she was in there. I just think that she's had a long day. Plus, she's always come off as a nervous person in all honesty. It's almost cute in a way. Yeah, that came off a bit more creepy now that I reread it. December 15th, 2021, 11:22 p.m. Alright, now I'm a little on edge. I just ended up getting a call from work, which would obviously be fine. If it wasn't for the fact that not only was the restaurant closed, but the entire mall was. Nobody was inside the building to be able to make the call. I didn't pick it up, I just let it ring. I didn't get a second call, luckily, which I thought would make me feel a little bit better. But something just isn't sitting right. I'm gonna try to go to bed. Maybe a good night's sleep will help me relax a bit. December 16th, 2021, 1:07 a.m. Could have sworn that I heard something downstairs. I texted Dad to check it out. He says that he didn't see anything wrong. It just doesn't make sense. I know what I heard, and I know that I'm not crazy or anything. Every part of me is telling myself that there's something wrong. But if nothing is truly there, then what can I do? Maybe I really do just need to go to bed after all. December 16th, 2021, 4:22 a.m. It's so late and I'm exhausted. I can barely even keep my eyes open as I write this, but I need to write this down, what I saw in my nightmare. At least I'm hoping that's all that it was. Felt so real, so vivid. I was in the middle of a pine forest and it was nighttime. When I looked up at the sky, the moon appeared to be bright, but it didn't help how dark it was immediately surrounding me. I could only see trees and dirt. Trees and dirt that went on out into the black void. The idea of being utterly alone, especially in the woods, always freaked me out. But this was something else. I couldn't see anything, or at least Dream Me couldn't see anything. But I was fully aware that no one was coming to help me. That only made it that much worse. I tried moving forward to get a bearing on my surroundings, but there wasn't anything else other than what I had seen before. Dirt, trees, and darkness. All that I was doing was getting myself more lost. But I had to move, I had to do something. I couldn't just stand there like a sitting duck. Soon enough, whatever presence was with me made itself known. There wasn't a rustling of bushes or the snapping of branches. No, nothing like that. But I heard a voice project itself from behind me. A low, distorted one that just barely sounded human if you tried hard enough to hear that part. "This is not your hour, Julius," it says, causing me to quickly snap around. But when I finished my turn, there wasn't anything there. So I spun back around to the direction that I was looking in to begin with, and I nearly fell over when I saw him, or whatever it was. All I knew is that it was no man. It couldn't have been. Well, it maybe had the shape of one, but that's where any normal human features about it stopped. It was like a man's shadow had grown a mind of its own and separated from him. A shadow man with red eyes. And oh, those eyes, those piercing red eyes. They were as bright as freaking traffic lights, staring me down like I was prey. Which in essence, I guess I was. I spun my head around and more of them appeared. They just kind of came out of nowhere, all surrounding me and probably preparing to close in. They repeated that same phrase, "This is not your hour, Julius." And all their voices combined together, it was horrible. A whole bunch of busted microphones all put together to make one horrific sounding call. And then they suddenly started flying over in my direction. And I mean flying. I just stood there doing nothing as they got close. Once they were within range to grab me, they did, and that's when I woke up. My eyes were wide with terror and I almost yelped like a frightened puppy before quickly cutting myself off. Who knows how mad my dad would have gotten at me for waking him up a second time in one night. December 16th, 2021, 12:45 p.m. About to start my shift. Just needed to relax a bit in the break room before I clock in. Still thinking about that dream last night. Am I overthinking or freaking out too much? I don't know, maybe I'm just a wuss at the end of the day. I was hoping to talk to Laura to brighten up my shift a bit, but according to my coworkers, she's a no-show, no-call today. I'm gonna just try and focus on the task at hand tonight and not let myself get too into my own head. December 16th, 2021, 8:52 p.m. I don't know how to say this, but one of those things from my dream, it was here. I saw it and I know that it was real. It was real. I think it's still inside the walk-in cooler. I told our acting manager to head inside there because I thought that I saw some leakage, and he said that there wasn't anything wrong. I think these things might be hunting me. Why are they coming after me? What did I do to deserve this? If you find this, whoever you are, just please help me. And that was it, the end of the journal. Poor Julius, the ending made his fate pretty clear. He had joined the ranks of the Nocturnals. Heck, he may even be one of the ones that we encountered out in the parking lot. "What'd you find?" Terrence asked, approaching me from behind. I hesitate for a second just before turning to look at him with a blank expression, trying to hide how disturbed I actually was. Figured that it was better to keep that to myself just for the sake of morale. "Just another piece of evidence. Keep a hold of this and make sure we get it back to Jennifer. She'll want to take a look." "Will do. You okay?" Seem a little dead, and more than usual. He jokes, seeing through my facade. "I'll be fine, let's just keep going, get this done and get the heck out of here." When we regrouped, it appeared at first that I was the only one who had found anything of true significance that was also of use. The next in line to me in that regard was Alex, who had seemingly discovered what looked to be a cracked disc with the words "Shadow Walkers" written on it in a black marker, making it obvious what it most likely contained. Found this in the office of the Brightburger over there. It was stuck midway in the disk tray of the computer, thinking that it might give us something else to work off of. I took the disc from him as he hands it to me, looking at it in close detail for a couple of seconds, before sliding it underneath the strap of my utility belt. "Yeah, we'll let Jennifer and the guys back at base have a look at it when we return," I told him. "For now, we need to start sweeping the areas that we haven't looked at yet. And..." My sentence was cut off by the sudden erupting sound of a dog's bark. But it was a bark that didn't sound very typical. not for any regular dog that I knew. This one was too bassy, and it reverberated as if it possessed its own internal echo. That wasn't mentioning the slight distortion that it had as well. The lights in the food court suddenly began to flicker and we all snapped to attention, preparing to defend ourselves. "Ron, behind you," Terrence calls out, pointing his finger at whatever he was referring to. I turn around. Behind me was the hallway that converged in the food court, and it led into the large corridor where all the various shops and businesses had resided. In the space that bordered both the food court and the corridor was a thick shadow, a shadow in the shape of a medium-sized dog, and just like with its human nocturnal counterparts, its eyes glowed a bright red. They pierced through the on and off darkness as the lights continued to flicker. "Not even the four-legged ones are safe from assimilation, huh?" I announced uneventfully, unable to find words to describe the bizarre nature of the encounter. "Guess not, poor pup," Melody adds. The nocturnal canine then begins to slowly levitate in our direction, barking deep as the flickering of the lights intensifies. I raise my light weapon, pointing it at the creature as he approaches closer with every passing second. "He ain't a pup anymore," Carter adds, eagerly lifting his light weapon in the air, just as Alex had backed out of the path of his beam. "Hey, put it down, I've got it," I tell him, reaching over to switch on my light. But instead of obeying, he recoils, looking at me as if I had just challenged his intelligence. "What, you don't think that I can handle one little ghost dog?" he growls, prompting me to lower my brows at him in frustration. "I'm not an idiot, you know." "Ah, shut it," I snarl in return. The dog was now less than a dozen feet away and I had to act. I put my finger on the light weapon slider and pushed it to the low setting, instantly bathing the canine in an ocean of light. Its loud echoey bark converts to a shallow and reverberated whimper, signifying that its wave of agony before annihilation. "You all start heading down. I'm gonna stay back and finish sweeping the court with Carter," I say, causing Carter to shoot me a worried look. "We'll be on comms and let you know if we run into anything," they say. "Perfect. We'll catch up in a couple of minutes." Garrett, Melody, Terrence, and Alex all turn and head down the main aisle. I watch them cautiously turn the corner, and remind them once more to watch each other's backs and to contact me if they get into trouble. And speaking of, I turn my attention over to Carter, who stood just a few feet to my right. Judging by the expression that crept up on his face, he knew what he was in for. It wasn't fear per se, but he looked guilty. "I'm sorry," he said calmly, prompting me to put up a hand. "You know, I could sit here and chew you out, yell at you. Even used to do a few slaps across the mouth back when I first started. Anyway, I just want to let you know that when I say something, I need it done that way, at that time. And as you can see, the stuff we do isn't a 9 to 5 in an air-conditioned office. If you screw up here, it ain't gonna result in paperwork getting shoved in the wrong filing cabinet. People die on this job. Many have and many will continue. We don't have room for questioning your superiors, not on the field at least. Because hesitation means death when you do what we do," I said before pausing, as Carter had looked desperate to interject a thought of his own after I spoke my last sentence. "It's not like I chose to be here. A lot of us didn't, sir." He punctuates the last second. "Don't tell Garrett that I said that." And despite the mood that I've been in for the past 20 minutes, I smiled, finding his slight awkwardness charming in a strange way. But he realized I still needed to address the issue at hand. "You were a forced recruit. They told me that they stopped doing that a long time ago." I informed him, my face contorting into a frustrated expression. "Yeah, I saw some stuff that I wasn't supposed to see. They told me that they couldn't let me go back out into the public with the things that I witnessed. Garrett and I were with each other when it happened, and we were kids, he says somberly. I couldn't help but sympathize. Perhaps I was going soft. I'm sorry, man, but as long as you throw some of that respect my way, I'll throw it back. Just next time, make sure to trust my leadership in public, and ask me questions in private, alright? Carter only responds with a slow nod. And just as I was about to tell him that we needed to go catch up with the others, both of our radios suddenly crackled to life, the distorted and frantic voice of Melody coming through them. I snapped to attention, going silent in order to listen with Carter.
Ron, we need you. They're moving in on us,
she cried, the tone of urgency ever so present. Let's go, now, I bark, beginning to turn and break into a run, or rather something resembling one, as I still had to carry my light weapon. Carter takes up the rear, following close behind me as we dart forward. It was only a matter of seconds before we passed the area where the food court and shopping hall initially converged, and then we made a hard left. All the ceiling lights flickering down the entire length of the corridor, towards the middle section of which I spotted Terrence, Garrett, Alex, and Melody, all standing in a circular formation, with their light weapons aimed and ready at the dozens of Nocturnals that surrounded them, fear and stress obvious in all of their expressions. Hang on, I call out, waving Carter over to keep pace with me as we started to head in their direction. But our attempt to intervene would be halted before we could even get 5 steps in their direction. The flickering of the lights greatly intensifies in a matter of seconds, all the way up to the point where they completely went out, drenching the corridor in a more potent darkness. I told Carter to get next to me and prepare for a fight, and it would be coming soon enough. I looked around, spotting several pairs of the Nocturnal's eyes surrounding the both of us, but they didn't move. Not yet, anyway. They just surrounded us as if to make sure there were no gaps for us to escape their clutches.
Is everything okay over there? What's going on?
Jennifer radios in, but I was in no position to make a reply. This is not your hour, Ron. Boomed the voices of the Nocturnals, all synchronizing as they said it. I could hear a mix of both men and women and even what sounded like a young child. That last part being further confirmed by a pair of red eyes that sat far below the rest, indicating a significant difference in height. A Nocturnal that had an outline resembling a young girl. I go to quickly switch my weapon on, reaching for the slider just as Carter releases a blood-curdling shriek. I turn around, watching as one of the Nocturnals yanked him further back into the darkness, causing him to drop his weapon and scream for his life as he vanished from my sight. No! I hollered desperately, frantic in my maneuvers to fight back. Ron! Carter cried out. I brought my weapon up and aimed it in the general direction that he had been grabbed, this time wasting not a single moment turning it on, and to the highest level that I had used up to this point. I couldn't let him die. The light exploded out, creating a beam that was so powerful that I had to turn away as I waved the weapon from side to side. The Nocturnals in the most immediate path of the beam were all almost instantly evaporated, having no chance to retreat or counterattack. They themselves also let out horrific cries of pain as the light made contact with their phantom anatomy. But I didn't care for their pain. They were human once, people like you and me who lived full and complex lives. But not anymore. They were simply creatures bent on the extermination of anything that wasn't themselves. Another horrible scream came from further down the corridor, but this one hadn't sounded like it was coming from the Nocturnals. No, it sounded much more human, and the reality of it being one of us registered with me quickly. The ones who hadn't been directly in the path of the light's weapon beam when I had turned it on began to move in on me, so I immediately threw myself forward and then did a 180, now shining the light at the Nocturnals who were previously behind me. But this group was prepared. They all quickly dispersed, avoiding the direct path of the beam, all of them quickly levitating to either side of it, just before I had finished turning around. but the brightness was far too powerful for that to completely shield them from its effects. The few Nocturnals on each side all quickly dashed backward, screeching and crying out in agony as they attempted to retreat. But I backed up and kept the light pointed forward in front of me, while turning my head to look for Carter. "Where'd you go, Carter? Are you okay?" I shouted frantically, only to feel my stomach sink once I had received no response from him. "Carter," I called out again, "tell me that you're all right." "Here," I heard him reply rather weakly from a distance. My eyes were focused forward at the group of Nocturnals, all attempting to flank around and ambush me at the sides. Hearing Carter's voice brought me some relief, but not enough. I turned, swinging my arms left and right, letting the light blare on either side of me to keep them at bay. The ones at the very front of each group were quickly evaporated, while the ones further back merely screeched and levitated backward into the darkness, their eyes being the only remaining indicator of their presence. I turned only my head and spotted Carter laying on the floor just a few feet behind me. "Can you get up?" I ask. "Are you injured?" "I don't know," he responds, his voice hoarse. I see him crawl forward and try to lift himself up in my peripheral vision. Carter groans as I work on dispatching the remaining Nocturnals, first shining my light directly on the group to my right, and evaporating them in the beam before I swing my body to terminate the ones on my left. They were already prepared, dispersing as far apart as they could before I was able to get the beam directly on them. I see a pair of eyes dart toward me, and before I could even react, my weapon was promptly yanked from my hands, getting thrown to the left and sliding along the floor in a harsh skid. The beam light flickers once it comes to a stop, seemingly from internal damage as a result of the manhandling. The Nocturnal responsible was now right in front of me, and I could feel a cold, ice-like and tight grip on my shoulder in the shape of a human hand. In a panic, I attempted to reach for my more traditional sidearm, but a second grip had found its way around my arm, stopping it dead in its tracks. I looked up and to my left, unable to move, now seeing two pairs of those glowing eyes staring right into my soul. And I thought of all my years of experience would prepare me for my own demise, but no. I knew what was in store for me, and it was a fate far worse than death. I don't think it would have been possible for me to feel terror like that anymore, but there I was, being proved horribly wrong. The Nocturnals both continued their stare as I feel an icy chill run its way up my spine, and it wasn't metaphorical. I legitimately felt like I was gonna freeze to death right then and there. It was a sensation cold that was unlike anything that I had experienced up to that point. "Assimilation," both of their voices combined to say, echoing and reverberating right in my ears. And just as I thought that it would be the end for me, that I was going to be transformed into a malicious, red-eyed shadow man, a sudden burst of light erupted from the left. I immediately close my eyes and I hear the two Nocturnals let out their now recognizable shrieks and cries of pain before the grip on both my shoulder and arm suddenly loosen. I drop to my knees with my eyes still closed as I shiver and my teeth chatter. It felt like I had just stepped out into the middle of Antarctica while being nude. Once I felt the brightness fade and knew that it was safe to open my eyes again, I did just that, looking to my left and seeing Carter standing there, panting heavily with his light weapon in hand. Are you okay?" he inquired, not looking 100% himself either. I nod my head slowly to answer his question, and then he walks over, reaching out his left hand and offering me to take it, which I do, thanking him for saving my life while my teeth are still slightly chattering.
Hello, is everything okay? Why haven't I been getting comms?
Jennifer radioed in once more, her tone frantic. It was rare that she ever lost her cool, even in scenarios like this. I reached up and got on my comms, quickly getting a reply out to calm Jennifer's nerves. "The current group has been terminated. Still have to do a head count," I say, trying to keep my tone calm despite what had just happened. I look over to the rest of the group and they all came running over to Carter and I while we were both in the midst of regaining ourselves. But hey, at least we can both say that we had survived a nocturnal assimilation initiation. A lot more than any of these others could say. When the rest of the team made it over, I was hoping to hear things like, "You two okay? No one is hurt, we're fine," but no, nothing could ever be that simple. And my rare feeling of optimism was quickly shot down by what Melody was soon to inform me of. "We can't find Terrence. Alex says that he saw him get grabbed by one of those things when we were surrounded and in the struggle." My jaw dropped as I heard it. It took a minute to register in my head. After everything that we had survived and endured together, he was going to be taken out like that. As much as the more logistical side of me knew that he was probably beyond saving, I still held out hope. "Do you know if he was assimilated for sure?" I probed, desperate for the answer that I wanted to hear. Alex stepped up, the expression on his face telling me that he wasn't in any hurry to spill the beans. "No, they were all just around us in every direction. We almost got overwhelmed. All I know is that I saw him get thrown back into the darkness by a few of those things. I was held up by the ones that were immediately on my butt, and I couldn't shine my light over in time to help him," he punctuates, looking at the floor while shaking his head. "But if he's nowhere to be found, I think we're too late." "So you're saying that you had a chance to help him but you saved your own skin instead?" Carter grilled in a snarly tone. "Hey, I messed up alright, get off my butt. If you both got grabbed by them and survived, I'm sure that he could have too. Maybe we just need to look a little bit harder," Alex retorted. "Yeah, you say that. Yet instead of doing that, you decided to come over here and waste all this time talking about it." "Alright, shut it, the both of you," I erupted. I think we gotta face the fact that Terrence is gone. We have a mission to complete and we need to finish the rest of these things off. He was a smart man and a good agent. He knew the risks of this job, and we'll make sure to avenge him. But we can't stop now. My little pseudo-speech was met with mostly silence, with the exception of Melody, who seemed to be taking it harder than anyone else. Or maybe that was me. I just had an easier time hiding it. "After everything, why did he have to go down like that?" she said softly, shaking her head left and right. "We're all gonna make sure that it wasn't in vain," I said in the most reassuring tone that I could muster. After we all took a moment to regain ourselves from the encounter, I radioed to Jennifer and let her know that Terrence had more than likely been assimilated. Her reaction was what I mostly expected, although I could sense a slight bit of grief in the tone of her reply. But I didn't push any luck by saying anything about it.
"Are the rest of you okay and able to fight?"
She asked in a way that demanded a specific answer. "Yeah, we should be fine," I'd tell her before going.
Was the recon team able to figure out any specific place or spot in the mall that they're most concentrated at?
Saw a bunch on the second floor when we were coming in, but they seemed to be pretty spread out. Might be a while before we can fully take all these things down if we keep going at it like this. And my weapon was destroyed as well, so I'll be relying on the others for a bit. A few moments of silence ensue as I hear the sound of Jennifer typing away on a keyboard in the background, presumably pulling up whatever data it is that she needed. There's a sports con store all the way at the back of the mall. It's the biggest business in there. One of the recon agents said that he saw a lot of them congregating there when he did a flyover with the team, but that might have changed in between the report updates. "We're gonna head there and finish this then, before anybody else dies," I say rather firmly, which was pretty bold at the time considering how Terrence's demise was technically my fault. Had I not told the team to head forward in order to stay behind and talk to Carter, then there was a chance that our extra firepower could have saved him. But I had to live with the gravity of my mistake and move on. As I said earlier, I wasn't going to let what happened to Terrence be for nothing. I gathered the team and we all set out for the sports con store, which was going to end up being around a 10-minute walk. so that gave us some time to talk and converse on the way there, which wasn't nearly as lively as it could have been, due to obvious circumstances. "So like what, you went into another dimension or something?" Garrett inquires while glancing over at Alex, keeping pace with him as Alex prepared to answer. "Call it the Expanse. I got stuck in there twice. Second time I got out. I ended up inside one of our facilities." Alex replies, "They took me in, trained me, and made me into a half-decent agent. And here I am." "So how does it work? You just find walls that looked weird and you could pass through them? Like a ghost, or do you have like special powers or something?" "Walls, floors, ceilings, whatever. There's a bit more to it than that. But yeah, you got the general idea down. It can happen to anyone at any time. Just gotta be in the right place at the right time. Or the wrong place at the wrong time, depending on your perspective." There was a pause as the two of them figured out what to say next. I almost felt proud that they were moving past their earlier hostility with one another, in the way a teacher is proud of their students. "And you two got attacked by a giant dirt monster, is that it?" Alex asked, breaking the palpable silence. "Pretty much. Can't really think of any other way to describe it. It killed and transformed one of our friends into something else. Happened when we all went trick-or-treating on Halloween. We were just kids." Alex's eyes go wide in a way that I hadn't seen them do before. He actually seemed pretty interested and concerned in what Carter was telling him. "That same thing also killed my dad. Just swiped him aside like he was a stuffed animal. Hit him so hard that he died on impact." Garrett interjects. "I'm sorry," Alex replied, visibly unsure on how to respond beyond that. "He's in a better place now. I'm glad that he doesn't have to see the rest of the terrible crap this world hides. But hey, at least now I know that when I'm on the field, fighting these things, these creatures, I can rest easy, knowing that I have nothing else to lose. Kinda helps me do the job a bit better in a weird way." I'll be honest when I say that I was now actively listening to everything that they had been talking about. This kind of camaraderie and dialogue wasn't something that you would usually hear on these missions. But ever since the change in management, things had been a bit more relaxed, and I think that carried over to most of the agents over the years. After hearing the tragic details of Garrett and Carter's past, he looked eager in a "I want to connect with you" sort of way, to share more about his as well, and he did just that. "You know how I talked about getting into the Expanse earlier, right?" he inquired, glancing at both Carter and Garrett. Yeah, they both shot back simultaneously. "Well, we had an entrance in the basement of my parents' house when I was a teenager. It was a wall that you could just kind of pass through. I told my parents about it time and time again, and they never believed me. Basically told me that I was crazy. So one day I tried to get video proof of it, and next thing you know I fell through it, and I was surrounded by yellow walls and I was getting chased by a giant centipede through a maze that I had never seen before. And according to the things that I found in that place, it was far from the first one to ever get trapped in there, but maybe one of the first to make it out." "You sure you just didn't take any hallucinogens?" Melody cracked sarcastically, prompting a lighthearted chuckle from each of the team members. As we finished sharing our small bit of laughter, I spotted the entrance of the sports con store. To the right of said entrance was a large 12-foot display statue of Santa Claus. Its face was sculpted in a way that made it look a little uncanny, almost as if it was staring at us and following our every movement with its eyes. "Yeah, I'm sure children will just be dying to run up to that thing," Melody blurts. "You read my mind," I added. "Only Satan would want to sit on that lap." As we neared the entrance, I radioed Jennifer, just to let her know that we had made it.
When you complained earlier, I sent out a second recon chopper to scan the building and see if you had missed any. According to the scan data they sent back to the site, the remaining lot of them should be inside that store. So all you have to do is take them out and you'll be okay to head back to the transport truck,
she informed me. I stopped both myself and the team, relaying what Jennifer had just said, prompting them all to look relieved that it would all be over soon enough. What are we gonna do without a light? Won't it be too dangerous? Asked Melody, genuine concern in her voice. I'm gonna do what I failed to do earlier. Watch all of your backs and make sure that nobody gets caught off guard. You guys got this, I'll be fine, I nodded. And as if on cue, the lights in the corridor began to violently flicker once more, prompting all of us to get into a back-to-back stance, as we had done previously. But I wasn't as fearful this time around. I actually felt confident. I had a team, a smart and capable team, and despite what we had lost up to this point, we were going to make sure that it served a purpose. Let's show these things what we're made of, I snarled, trying to get Carter, Garrett, Alex, and Melody to share my current mindset. The flickering of the lights intensified. I kept an eye on the entrance to the store as we all anticipated seeing the shadows, the red eyes and hearing the distorted voices that were all too familiar. If I die, I just want to let you guys know that you're not the morons that I thought you were, Carter announced. We're gonna make it, Alex growled in response, clearly not sharing Carter's doubts. If we all keep our heads on straight, we'll be okay, Melody added. The flickering reached a breaking point, and soon enough, it felt like we were standing in the middle of a dance floor in some low-budget nightclub. The constant millisecond transitions between darkness and light became disorienting. We all verbally complained and cursed, waiting for the shadowy adversaries to show themselves, and we got what we wished for soon enough. Suddenly, the flickering came to a halt. In this particular corridor, it went dark, the only sources of light being that from inside the stores on either side of where we stood. Looking back at the entrance to the SportsCon store, I saw the pairs of red eyes begin to appear. Two at a time, they popped up within the pool of darkness right outside of the door. I counted 40 pairs, all of them lined up with each other in a perfect single-file fashion, if you could call it that. They all focused on us, making not a single movement, as we watched each other. Light is a plague, came the amalgamation of all sorts of their voices at once, the echoes of such carrying its way down the corridor. I ordered everyone to stand their ground and to be alert, and prepare as we waited for them to initiate their attack, an attack that I was sure would leave us in great peril. This is the single biggest group that we had faced inside the building yet, and we were down one light weapon. But the moments went by and they never moved forward. It left me wondering what they were planning, and what strategy that they had in mind to utilize against us. Perhaps they were even smarter than we previously assumed. Just when I had thought that it was going to turn into some long standoff, they were suddenly in motion once again. Not at us though, no. They all darted toward the giant statue of Santa outside the store entrance. What the? Melody questioned, flabbergasted in her tone. And judging by everyone's expressions, we had all agreed with her. They all began to surround the statue, making a perfect circular formation around it. And after holding that position for only a few seconds, they levitated forward in a violently quick manner, all of their bodies visibly passing inside the statue itself. We all then slowly backed up at my command, and I watched with the rest of the team in a combination of horror and awe as this strange mind-bending event took place right in front of us. Once all 30 of the Nocturnals had gone inside, the statue's white marble exterior slowly began to shift in color. The marble appears to maintain its hardness as it transformed into a pitch-black shade, of course, like that of a shadow. Everything but the red hat, coat, and boots all turned black and took on the form of a shadow. and each of these statues' creepy eyes disappeared behind two separate walls of glowing rose red circular blobs. I don't know how or if they had been able to do things like this the whole time, but I wasn't going to get much time to ponder it anyway. Did they just... Alex began. Yeah, they went full on Power Rangers, Garrett said, finishing Alex's sentence. The nocturnal statue then slowly moved forward, its right foot inching forward and hitting the floor with a hard bang, prompting me to question if it was still truly solid, despite the fact that it had the form of Nocturnal, or at least it did on the outside. Lights on now, full power, I shout as the Nocturnal Santa then turns his head, looking down at us with nothing but malice and spite. Melody, Garrett, Carter, and Alex all switched their light weapons on while also making sure that they stood shoulder to shoulder to avoid getting blinded. The four of them all coordinated, concentrating their beams directly on Nocturnal Santa, but this had very minimal effects, as I stood back and watched the statue turn its now shadowy head and raise an arm to block out the light. It seemed to be doing nothing more than simply irritating the newly formed creature. I immediately got myself on communications, as it was clear to me that we simply didn't possess the proper firepower to take this thing on, and that we would die trying if we continued. Jennifer, gonna need some backup here now, I desperately plead, avoiding an incoming piece of debris that had been torn up from one of the statue's footsteps. With its arm still covering its eyes, the creature takes a step forward and lunges downward, attempting to swat all of us away with its left arm. Luckily, this thing was slow enough for all of us to react in time and evade what would have been a fatal blow.
What's going on over there? Why do you need extra help?
Jennifer replied after my radio crackled to life. Not really any time to explain. Please, just get another team out here immediately. Nocturnal Santa charges forward at me, the ground below cracking and shaking as he, or it, moves at a much faster and far more terrifying pace than previously. The statue raises one of its shadow arms and makes a fist, preparing to slam it down and crush me as if I was nothing more than an insect. But I maneuver just in time, falling backward and somersaulting out of the spot of the impact. The marble floor is instantly smashed to pieces upon impact, just a mere feet in front of me. And with our light weapons being useless against this monstrosity, I knew that we weren't going to be able to fight this thing off, not without backup. So I told the team to do the only thing that we really could do. Run. Let's go, drop the weapons, all of you. I shouted while still on my butt, but after quickly jumping back up to my feet, I waved them over to join me in what would end up being one of the most intense cardio exercises of our lives. And I didn't have to tell them twice. They all immediately dropped their light weapons and darted over to me. Alex led the pack, Melody wasn't far behind, and Garrett and Carter took up the rear. As they all caught up with me and put distance between themselves and their weapons, the statue raised a foot high, held it for a second and brought it down with devastating force, smashing all four of the lights as if they were made of nothing more than cheap cardboard. The lights in the mall began to flicker more severely than ever as we ran down the corridor in a full sprint, with the statue not all that far behind us. I held out hope that we would survive. As I stated earlier, Site 12 wasn't very far away from the mall, and if we booked it, by the time the second team had finished gearing up and heading over in a helicopter, we would be able to meet them at the front of the mall, but only if we didn't stop. Back to the entrance, go, I exclaimed like a drill sergeant. The lights continued flickering as I hear the thunderous footsteps of the statue behind us, the floor being cracked and smashed with every stride that thing took. You cannot stop the darkness. Its voice boomed and it sounded nothing like Santa, but just another group of Nocturnals, all collaborating on their vocals. We all began panting as we kept pumping our legs. I could feel the strain with every step, but I knew what stopping meant for me and the rest of my team. Midway through the death-defying run, I thought of any possible ways to slow this thing down, panicking as I failed to come up with anything that wouldn't get me or one of them killed. and it appeared that Garrett had the same idea. He turned around and quickly pulled his sidearm from his belt, aiming it right at the statue as he prepared to take a shot. That is, until I dashed over and grabbed the pistol out of his hands before slapping his arm down. "I can buy us time," he blurted. "No, you're not playing hero, let's go," I demanded with the fury of an angry father. Garrett, however, was quick to obey once he and I were nearly crushed by the slamming of the statue's fist, just before we took off running again. Both of us hollering as we jumped back just in the nick of time. We rounded the corner and finished making our way through the main shop corridor, now merging into the food court area, with the entrance in our line of sight. We dashed into the food court, running down the middle and evading the tables, chairs, and support beams, while the statue just simply smashed and ran right through them. They did very little in the way of slowing this thing down.
"The second team's chopper should be arriving any second, just hang on,"
came Jennifer once more through the radio. But it brought me no relief, not with how much adrenaline was pumping through my veins at the time. And she was right. On the other side of the large pane glass window just above the mall entrance doors, I spotted the chopper hovering around 30 feet off the ground, waiting for us to make it outside. I kept going, keeping pace with Melody, Carter, and Alex as I caught up with them. But Garrett had lagged significantly behind when I turned my head to look back, and the statue had its eyes on him. All of us practically threw ourselves out of the entrance, all of us except for Garrett, who was still a couple dozen feet inside the mall. The look of horror on his face being contagious as we watched a piece of debris the statue had kicked forward, hit him in the back and sent him face first right onto the floor. "No!" Carter screamed, but his voice was drowned out by the sound of the whipping of the helicopter blades as it lowered itself to be more level with the entrance, and by extension the statue. The statue stopped for just a matter of moments, and it lifted its leg up, preparing to smush Garrett and turn him into a pile of human mush. Carter then suddenly lunges forward, attempting to run back for his friend, and despite all the running that he had just done, it was clear that he still had plenty of adrenaline left in him to try and save Garrett. "Carter, no!" I exclaimed, trying and failing to chase after him. He left me in the dust as I tried to stop him before he made it back to the entrance. I didn't want to sit there and watch Garrett meet his demise either, but I couldn't risk Carter potentially suffering the same fate. But it didn't matter, because as we neared the entrance, the chopper fired an explosive rocket into the building. I could barely even comprehend the trail of smoke and the rippling sound of the rocket as it propelled past us. But once the rocket had hit its target, that being the statue, the resulting explosion sent both me and Carter flying back several feet. I groaned and howled as I rolled across the ground, before coming to a stop after a few seconds. Blood made its way down my forehead, and I could feel that my gear had suddenly felt much warmer around me due to the heat of the explosion. That wasn't even mentioning the ringing in my ears either. Carter had gone unconscious, but according to Melody, he was still breathing. Alex had darted over to me as I looked back at the now desecrated entryway in a speechless expression, waiting for all the Nocturnals that were previously inside the now destroyed statue to emerge and commence an attack in their separate forms. But they never came, which puzzled me, considering how I had seen them function up to this point. "You alright, boss?" he asked, but I only knew it because I had read his lips. I didn't verbally respond. I simply kept staring forward, knowing that the threat had been eliminated. But we still lost another team member. There was not a chance that Garrett had survived the blast, and the last thing that I wanted to see were the various pieces of him that had probably been flung every which way. It wasn't long after that when the second team came down and assessed what had happened, before taking us back to Site 12. As it turns out, I suffered a fracture in my arm, which wasn't fun at all when the pain had set in after the adrenaline wore off. The medical division did their thing, and I was going to be in a cast for an uncertain period. But hey, at least that meant a break from field work for a bit. Alex ended up going back to his site until he was supposed to permanently transfer over here, and I had honestly looked forward to potentially working with him in the future. Jennifer ended up allowing me a couple of days of rest before we had a post-mission conference between the two of us, and I was ready to get chewed out or worse. I took that time to do some very limited training with Melody, as we talked about the insane experiences that we had had with Terrence over the years. Wasn't going to be the same without him. Carter was more than broken up by what had happened to Garrett, and I couldn't blame him. That was his childhood friend after all, and after everything that they had went through, he had been snuffed out just like that. Sometimes I wish a bit more mercy existed in the world. I went out of my way to invite him to sit in on a few leadership meetings, of course making sure that I had been authorized to do so first. But soon enough, the final day came for me to give Jennifer my answer about the offer for Assistant Director of Operations, and just like that, I found myself inside her office once again. Is there a reason the missile was able to kill all the ones inside the statue without any light-based weapons being needed? Would have been nice to know if it was that simple the whole time, I asked, doing my best to bite my tongue as I said it. I actually asked Dr. Garth and his team the same thing, and we had no records or documents of the Nocturnals ever doing something like that before. Garth said that it was likely due to the fact that the Nocturnals can only fully assimilate a living, breathing creature made up of organic material, and that because they attempted to assimilate an object, especially one that large, it didn't turn out the same. They seemed to end up trapping themselves inside the statue, and when it was destroyed, they were as well, due to some of its more solid properties transferring into theirs. I wasn't even quite sure how that made any sense, but it's like I always say, nothing makes sense in this job. I didn't have anything to say in response to her explanation, so she of course moved on, not wanting to waste my time. So I know you're aware of what I need from you today. I'm sure you've had plenty of time to think it over. I need to know, Ron, do you want this promotion? Jennifer sighs, cupping her hands together on top of her desk. I looked at my cast and then at the floor. The room went so quiet that all you could hear was the blowing of the air conditioning. I had made my mind up about this matter as soon as the mission had ended. I was just circulating through all the different ways to tell Jennifer in my head, but soon enough it came to me, and it was the answer that I should have given all along. No.